all day. You might have missed it. President Trump is actually filing a lawsuit. He finally got around to it, and he basically named everybody: Hillary Clinton, some FBI people, Rodney Joffe's named, and others as well. So a lot of questions kind of arose, and there was a lot of excitement. And then people started looking at the lawyers he hired, and we'll kind of touch base on a little bit of everything. So right off the bat, I mean, you know, a lot of people are asking for takes on, well, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And the answer is kind of dependent on what your expectations are and what you're really interested in seeing. So, if this is just a shot across the bow, well, point made. I mean, it's more than sufficient for that. I mean, if it's just intended to be something to turn up interest in the media and a big discussion point out there, well, that's a brilliant move. I mean, the filing is more than sufficient to do that, and John Durham will have filings in a couple weeks, and having a few stories out today might have perked up some ears a little bit, especially with the RICO civil case being filed. So if that was the intention, I mean, that'll definitely be sufficient to do that. Um, if the intention is to actually get to the discovery phase, there might be a few issues, and I'd definitely leave that point open for some of the lawyers to come in and talk a little bit more about the legalities of the case. Because, as I said, I mean, there's a lot of people named in this filing, and I know there are some deficiencies, and a couple that some of the lawyers pointed out to me in DMs. First off, would be with the RICO case, there has to be predicate offenses, and the filing doesn't really go into that. And the statute of limitations is really 4 years. So you're looking for predicate offenses that occurred in the last 4 years. And the filing really doesn't talk about any, right? Everything it talks about is way back in 2016. So, they can do an amendment and they can do like an addendum and add in some of that information, but they're going to want to do that pretty quickly here, I would assume. And again, like, I'm going to leave that wide open, and hopefully we have, Ship or King come in, and I'll let them kind of enunciate what all that means. I mean, there's plenty of predicate of events, I think, within the 4 year statute of limitations. So, you think about like the July 2018 letter that was sent to Congress from the FBI, where they basically said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with Danchenko. We found him to be honest. And by that point, he had been interviewed like 7 times, and there was no basis whatsoever to offer any conclusion that Danchenko was being honest, or that any reporting was substantiated. I mean, there's nothing there in July 2018. So I might look at something like that as a predicate offense. I'm sure if we really thought about it, there's probably a few others. And again, I'm going to leave that point for lawyers to kind of get into, because that's really not my area of expertise. So, MB, I mean, did you have any thoughts on the filing today? Is there anything came to your mind?
Well, my first thought was I had no idea that you could sue somebody civilly for RICO. That to me was like, wow, that's really interesting. So, definitely from a non-lawyer's point of view, it's okay, well, what are the details of all this? How serious is it? Is it really something that has legs? And I think King pointed out that it was like triple fines if they were actually, found liable, or, if the lawsuit actually happened, that it would be 3 times the fine. So, the money to these people doesn't really matter, but it's just interesting that is something that you could do in a court. The other thing about RICO that I always picked up from King and Ship and other people is that it's a really complicated thing to prove criminally. I mean, it's always like, oh, yeah, RICO. Everyone says that's a charge, for all the Spygate. That's always been something that people have been, screaming for. And the former prosecutors always seem to be like, well, no, it's really hard to prove. It's complicated. You're almost always better off, doing something else with conspiracy or other charges, because RICO is just, it's not this, well, these people conspired to do something and therefore it's RICO. So I'd be really interested as well to hear, is it going to be that difficult in a civil case to prove? I assume it's not going to be easy. And how serious is this case, or is it just, maybe it's just Trump and his people, wanting to be in the news and giving a fuck you and saying, hey, why not? We're going to do it because we can.
Yeah, I think a couple great points you just made there, and to the point. I mean, if this is really an intention to go and get into the discovery phase and have Hillary Clinton sit for deposition, I don't know. I don't know. I was really busy today, so let me say first off, I have not read this thoroughly. It's 108 pages, so don't be too hard on me. But from what I skimmed, it is a little bit better than I would have had initially thought. There are some problems with it, which I don't like to see, especially as it is such a complex case and such a wide ranging case. You don't want anything that's going to be holding it up to get to that discovery phase. And there are some points that can be challenged. Now, there's a few things that stood out to me, and again, there's probably a few more if I actually dig into it. But like one of them was that Rodney Joffe had hacked the Trump Tower and like this Trump apartment and the White House. Now, hacking is really not the correct term for what happened. Joffe had authorization to look at this data. He just did it for an unauthorized purpose. Now, is that a hack? I don't know if that's the correct verbiage to really describe that. And as Leslie did a fantastic job pointing out a few weeks ago, um, there are some nuances to that of whether that's actually criminal. If you have access and you abuse the access, that's not necessarily criminal. Now, in some locations, it is, and there's arguments to be made, but it's a highly technical argument, from what I understand, and I'm a complete layman in that. So maybe if she comes in, we can ask her about that. Um, a couple other points that stood out to me was one point was that Rodney Joffe, they said and they alleged, has an ownership interest in Zetalytics and Dissect Cyber. Now, I'm not saying that's not true. I don't know. For all I know, it is true, but there's nothing in the public domain on that. So if they have some information that I don't, they might be right about that. But what's in the public and what's searchable, I don't see anything that would say, yes, Rodney Joffe has an ownership interest in those two entities. His longtime business partner is Raymond Salino, who's associated with him in multiple entities. He is in the registration documents for Zetalytics, but that's really the extent. There's really nothing else that would tie anybody to Zetalytics or Dissect Cyber. So that point I thought was a little bit sloppy. I mean, even if it's true, I mean, they're going to have to prove out, like, how do you know that? Like, what are you basing that on? So there's just a couple points like that I didn't like. But on the whole, I mean, just skimming through it, they did hit a lot of the major points. So I don't know. It's an incredibly complicated case. We'll see, if it can move forward, if it gets dismissed against certain defendants or what the case may be. And again, they had to do an amendment to kind of include some of these predicate offenses if this is the intention to actually get it to court or to get it to the discovery phase. It's not sufficient in its current state. Now they can amend it and hopefully get some of that in there, and then they might have a stronger case. But we can talk a little bit about the lawyer selection too. I want to get Willie in here. Um, Willie, go ahead. Oh, still connecting. Hey, Willie, you there?
Yeah, no, it just really. I think before this lawsuit dropped, we were discussing somewhere else about like how bad Trump's lawyers were following the 2020 election, um, and I've still, I just, I'm not quite there on this case. I'm hoping that he thinks that we can join it as amicus curiae or something and make it work. But uh, nah. At the moment, I'm just skeptical. Really am. I can't see as it's going forward. Uh, yeah, it ticks all the boxes, but we ticked all the boxes going from the election. lawsuits, and I'm just not there yet.
Well, we'll see, right? And that's kind of the point I made off the bat. I don't think you were here. I mean, it's really, what's his intention? If it's just a shot across the bow to, get this in the news, that's job well done. I mean, that there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I mean, if he's just, he wants it in the news so that when John Durham's indicting people here in a couple weeks, there is, something to reference and something to talk to. That's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. He certainly doesn't have to incur millions of dollars of legal fees and chase down all these people. But if he does want to take this to at least the discovery phase and actually start getting evidence and having people sit for depositions, I don't know. I mean, I one of the more common comments I heard today, who are these lawyers? I've never heard of these lawyers, and I would agree with that. Now, once I actually read the filing, it's not that bad. I mean, they hit some of the major points. There are some issues with it. There are some deficiencies with the predicate offenses not really being flushed out to meet the statute of limitations. But, with an amendment, maybe they're okay. I don't know. I would have liked to have seen him hire like a big time law firm or Alpha's lawyer. So I put that out earlier. I mean, the Alpha Bank attorneys, their U.S. law firm, they did a fantastic job. And my point is, why reinvent the wheel? Like, if you're trying to search for a good lawyer, you just watch. Hopefully, they were watching this Alpha case unfold, and they did a fine job. I mean, these lawyers are good, and obviously, with them being involved in the last few years, they're already up to speed. They know exactly what's going on. They might have to expand it a little bit to get into the Clinton and the FBI side of it, but they're light years ahead of where this new law firm is really going to be. So I would have liked to have seen President Trump go that route, but we'll see. I mean, I leave it open. I don't. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the game plan is. So,
and that is the thing I was thinking today. Like, we've lost the alpha lawyers. They can't be paid by free sanctions. Like Freeman is on like $3,000 a week or something, or month. It's probably going to be in a council house or whatever it is in London. Yet all that information of the Alpha Bank lawyers is all sat there. It's all waiting, and via sanctions that's just been put on hold. Well, it's not been put on hold. It's been put on hold with prejudice because he's had to withdraw because he's Russian or something. So maybe this Trump lawsuit is going to take up the slack of what the Alpha Bank lawsuit originally was, because we learned a lot by that. It's not like completely public filings, but we learned a lot. They learned a lot. I think Durham learned a lot, and this new Trump lawsuit. The first thing I thought about was, well, how do we insert ourselves as a amicus curiae, like friend of the court? Because a lot of the stuff, but it's a civil lawsuit, and a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about is involved. So where is our representation?
yeah, I don't. Go ahead, MD.
I was just going to agree with you guys that the alpha lawyers would have been, I mean, that's a great idea. Or bringing in somebody like Hans from this corner that is just versed on this stuff. And so you don't make mistakes, because everybody knows how this works. Everybody knows how the game's played. You make one mistake out of, you get 99 things right out of 100. It's that 100th that the media is going to grab, and they're going to go, oh, see, fact checkers do this. This whole thing is BS. It's wrong because this little detail is wrong. So you have to have everything right. Get all your ducks in a row. And of course, you should always do that. So, it's kind of a little bit disheartening to see that there are already a few potential mistakes in there that could have been sussed out. And, without too much trouble, you could have some people fact checking for you and just going, no, 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 that's not exactly right. This is the way to phrase that. And hopefully, if the case moves forward, that they avail themselves of some people that really have these facts at their fingertips.
Yeah, I'm not so sure they're going to be able to bring us in. I mean, I would love to see them, reach out to Techno or Hans and bring them in, and that would be a great idea. But um, you know, getting more of us in there, I think that's pretty unlikely. I think the best thing that we can do is to continue analyzing documents and fighting for FOIAs. So FOIA fan is just fantastic, and he's been fighting so hard for the last few years. And it sounds like if things go according to plan, he's going to get some really important State Department documents probably next week or the week after. So that's going to be amazing to see. Um, I know he's working on some other stuff as well. I've got some FOIAs out there. I know Techno does a lot of FOIAs and others as well. So I think that's the best thing that we can do. And if we can get more stuff into the public domain, and then they can use that in their litigation and work off of some of those public documents, and we can draw a little bit more information if they can get to discovery, and then we can submit FOIAs off of that, right? I mean, that was the real value for me in the Alpha case. It was incredibly educational. I mean, we learned so much from that civil case, and then we took that and we were able to go out and hunt for FOIAs and have a starting point for a lot of different pieces. And now, I mean, I have dozens of FOIAs out there. I don't know how many others have, but I certainly have dozens out there. And if I just get 10% of them, I mean, we're going to be doing pretty well, I think. So, Mitt, I'm going to go ahead and add you a speaker. If you have a question or comment, go ahead. Mitt, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, whether formally or informally, I think the ideas of Technofog and Hans and all that, those are, absolutely fantastic. I've gone in to district attorneys' offices and been an expert witness and then also an expert information provider in those situations. And they need it. They absolutely have to have it. Lawyers are spinning their wheels for hours and hours and hours to try to catch up to get to a spot to where they're only a quarter of halfway where you're already at. You know what I mean? So, but to go in formally and be part of it, of course, you'd have to be vetted. Whoever ends up doing that, be vetted. I'm sure Techno and Hans have no problem with that. But getting in front of them and supplying the information, it never ceases to amaze me. Everyone that that you hear from when they comment on this story, not in this corner, but I'm talking about in the public, someone that's got some notoriety and some public chops, and congressmen, senators, people within Trump's circle, and I'm always flabbergasted with the either the lack of information that they have or the complete ability to be unaware of what they're talking about as far as this Russiagate event takes place. And for you to be able to sit down in front of those guys and say, hey, look, this is what we've done. And you may be able to do a little legwork ahead of time by going through the filing, picking out the areas where you think you have the most information and the best information, and collating those two things together. And, if I was serious about it, I would spend the $700 for an hour of time with that particular attorney firm and just go in for a consultation, you paying them and saying, hey, this is who I am. This is my curriculum vitae. This is your filing. I've highlighted, notated everything that I think is important as far as I'm concerned. And here's the research that I've done on that. And it's got 500 hours of research put into it that's dialed in and ready to go. And you can decide to use it. You can talk to me about it. You can bring me back. I'll work, pro bono, or, I'll charge a fee, whatever it is. But there is value to it. There's a lot of different hoops to jump through. Attorney firms do it all the time. And I run to Willie in another spot all the time. And I just spoke to him earlier about the problem. You don't see any the big name firms with the big name attorneys and partners and reps. They're representing Colgate, they're representing Daimler Benz, they're representing the most woke corporations in the world. And they're not going to take on MAGA as a client. It's bad business for them, right? So you're going to have to settle for a middling firm, and you're going to go up, they're going to be going up against the big firms. And that's probably just the way it's going to end up. So there, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think you had a lot of great points there, and I think that was kind of the feeling that I had about the guys that representing Alpha Bank, right? Because they can handle the heat. They just represented some Russian oligarchs in the midst of everything that's going on. I mean, that takes some backbone to do that. So I figured, somebody like that, they can handle the pressure, and that would have been a great resource for President Trump. So that's another reason that I was kind of thinking of them. And I mean, to your point, you kind of alluded to it. I mean, if somebody was starting from point zero, and a lot of people in the media are on the story. I mean, they've reported on it, but they literally have no idea what's going on. They haven't spent 20 minutes looking at all the documents that we have available now. And one of the real challenges that I see coming down the road, especially when the indictments get to the point where you can't ignore it anymore, is the media is not going to have a starting point. I mean, there's no experts for them to bring on. They don't have any in-house information on this. And you can't learn everything you need to learn to report on this accurately. Like you couldn't start now and be ready by the end of the year. There's just not enough time. I mean, it takes a couple years of digging through these documents, bouncing it back and forth off of sounding boards and people that actually know what's going on as well. And, handing it back and forth before you really understand what's really happening. So, to have that level of knowledge is just not something that anybody in the media is going to have when we really need them to have that. So I'm really concerned about what that's going to spell out for us, because, it's one thing for John Durham to bring the indictments, but if there's not anybody that's going to be able to translate that for the American public, I mean, is the ball really going to get moved forward? I mean, does Hillary Clinton pretty much have to be prosecuted for everybody to know that there's something there? I mean, is that what it's going to take, or can they bring on the sleuths? I mean, there's nothing wrong with them reaching out to Fool Nelson or Hans or Techno and hiring them. Like, bring them on. You're the consultant. You're going to be on air. You're going to report on this, and we're just going to trust you with it. And I think that's what I would hope and like to see, but I just don't see that happening. So, started to ramble there. I'm going to add somebody else that's requesting to speak here. That one guy. Go ahead.
Hey guys, just a couple quick points. I am a practicing attorney, and I just wanted to address first, the idea. I'm right there with you. I'd love if Trump could get a big law firm involved in this, but a big consideration before you take on a client is going to be conflicts of interest. I mean, if you look at who represented Alpha Bank, that would be Skaden. Skaden, had to pay out a settlement relating to the Manafort indictment. I'm sure they've been involved in other cases, so it's not just this matter. It's a law firm's going to have to look through their records and see if they've ever represented a client adverse to Trump. And as you can imagine, most of these bigger law firms are run by left-leaning attorneys, and they are more than willing to sue Trump. So that's one consideration. And then in terms of, using some of these sleuths as experts, I really just struggle with how that's going to work, at least in court. You're going to be subject to a Daubert motion to exclude, and good luck showing, peer-reviewed methodology to back up their opinions. I guess you could say, relying on experience by itself, but I really think the way to go is just to try to rely on them as consultants. But yeah, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree with that. That I think as researchers, if nothing else, that are, just someone that can say, look, you can't say that. We haven't proven that. Say this instead. so it doesn't work its way into filings. And if you're doing, media, it doesn't end up on television, because that's the stuff that really kills us is people get out over their skis and then it gets run with. And all of a sudden Fox News is saying something that's just not supportable. And it just starts to look like a big conspiracy theory. And that's something we're going to have to battle against all the way through.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and open this up for questions or comments. So if anybody has anything, go ahead and request to speak. But I think to that point, I mean, Fox News is a great example, right? I mean, they're like the one major mega outlet for conservatives, and they get out too far over their skis, and then they kind of get in trouble, and then they don't cover the next thing. So to your point, I mean, that's so important to point out, because they got out over their skis and they said, Clinton was paying Joffe, and Joffe hacked these servers and stuff that's not right, stuff that's not in the documents. And then people went and fact checked that. And I got a fact check on Facebook, and the fact check said, like, completely wrong information. Like, the fact check was wrong. The fact check said, Fox News is not correct on this, but it went like 2 steps further than that. And it said, there's no evidence that there was spying on, the president or whatever. And I was like, wait a minute, that's like right in the indictment. It says that Joffe abused his access to look for derogatory information on President Trump. Now, whether he's president at that point or the incoming president, spying is confirmed. Like, there's no question that there was spying there. There's unauthorized access and looking for derogatory information. That's spying. And the fact checks went way over that line. And that's what everybody reports now. And that's what everybody in the country thinks about what is going on. And it just undermines everything that's happened. And I mean, I just wish they would just read it really closely, bring in some of the sleuths as consultants to like be editors and fact check this and just report it, because the truth is bad enough. Like, the truth is a monster of a story. You don't have to go anywhere else. Like, you don't have to be, anticipate anything that's coming. Just report exactly what's in the indictment. So that's my 2 cents. Got on my soapbox there. Will, you got anything else? Otherwise, I mean, I'll open it up. I don't see anybody else that's in the queue for questions or comments here, but I'll keep it open if anybody has anything. Let me check my DMs here. I guess I have a few other people that have asked me some questions that are unrelated to this filing. So I'm still pursuing some FOIAs. I can't really preview stuff that's coming, but there will be stuff coming. Sorry, I have to tease you guys. I mean, I'd like to just say, yeah, I can just push out whatever I want to push out, but I'm trying to, kind of be engaged with like a larger reach, right? So instead of just sharing stuff out with my, few thousand followers and then, it not reaching out much more than that, I'm trying to give it to the right people. So it's in national reporting and everybody can access it. So, trying to hold on to scoops and feed them and layer them correctly. And when I can't do that, I'm going to push it out. I'm not withholding anything for like any other purpose than to like maximize the reach. That's the only reason I would do it. So I have a lot of FOIAs out there, and I've got good news on a few of them as far as processing, good news on identifying records. And so I'm in a good position to fight for stuff that I'm looking at, and should be interesting. I mean, I'm just pursuing a lot of stuff. So keeping it open, guys. If you guys got questions or comments, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to end this one.
Well,
Another 5-10 minutes here.
I'm just gonna say right now, like, I don't know. It's like, I can't remember when you started bullying Georgia Tech, but it was a whisper of a dream back like 5 or 6 months ago. I said, "Oh, could we foil Georgia Tech?" as a throwaway comment, and and like now you have this like amazing amount of research and FOIA documents which are just there, and 6 months ago we didn't know that we could FOIA Georgia Tech. We didn't know
Yeah, I
this
mean,
stuff.
I give a lot of credit to Margot Cleveland because she was the first one to do it, and she came back with a number of files specific to monos, I believe,
Exactly. Yeah.
and then I just had this curiosity. I was like, well, are there more FOIAs? And I was like, you don't want to ask people to put in FOIAs or whatever if it's like, you don't know what's going on or whatever. Like I was nervous to ask her, so I was just like, you know what? I'll start putting in FOIAs. And so I got COVID around Christmas, and like couldn't go to any family events, and I just had like a full week where I was just sitting around doing nothing. So I just started putting in FOIAs, and I must have put in like probably 70 FOIAs, and I put in a few to Georgia Tech, and I was like, I put in 70 FOIAs, and I was like, if I just get one process, I'll be so happy. And then a few weeks later, I got my first FOIA process, and it was like from the state of Illinois. I was looking for stuff for GRU related to something Mueller was doing, and it came back, and it was just news articles, and I was like, oh, that sucks. There's nothing. And then like the next day, I started getting stuff from Georgia Tech, and man, I'm happy to see them process stuff under FOIA. I mean, Georgia is like the model for the country. I mean, they do FOIA the right way, and I'm happy Georgia Tech kind of follows the law to the letter of the law and the intent of the law, and they just push out documents. I mean, you FOIA something and it's in accordance with the law, they're going to give it to you. And yeah, now I've got like over 1,000 pages of documents from Georgia Tech. I've got more stuff in the works, and yeah, I mean, I had a quick talk a few days ago, and Daniel, I don't know if you're here or not. Daniel stepped to the plate. I know he put in a couple FOIAs, but FOIA fan and I just had like a quick 10-minute talk one day about putting in FOIAs. And if anybody's interested, like if you've ever had a curiosity about what the government has on a certain topic, Russiagate or not, don't be afraid to put in FOIAs. It's really a simple process. There's plenty of examples of FOIAs online, or you can reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you. The fees are usually pretty low. If you're looking at like high fees, you'd probably want to modify your request. They're usually not that bad. So yeah, don't be afraid to put in FOIAs if anybody's out there.
Yeah, I think the whole Georgia thing, we got put off with the whole election thing. I'm not sure he's on here now. Anders Poole, Sharon Miller's, whatever I forget his handle, but um, this was like back in the elections, and oh my god, he put in it's open records, not FOIA, in Georgia, and he put that in for the video of all the drop boxes, and they came back with this. It was like $30,000-$40,000 just to store the election drop boxes, and he was willing to pay it, but anyway, somebody else had done it. The Truva Vote or somebody in Georgia, and that's not happening. But people putting in FOIA or open records requests is a great way to like hold everything to account basically. And I didn't know like 6 months ago that you could FOIA Georgia Tech, but apparently you can, and it's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it's a nice thing, right? I mean, if they get money from the federal government or the state government, generally speaking, you can probably FOIA them. There are plenty of private universities, unfortunately, that I'd like to FOIA that I can't. So, yeah, kind of lucked out on that one. I'm really happy they did all this stuff in Georgia, and I'm happy they did it at Georgia Tech so that we could have access to it. And I see we have Daniel here. Daniel, congrats, man! I saw it put in the FOIAs a couple days ago. That's awesome, dude.
My first FOIA. I was so happy. I actually had to do 3 because it had to do to each different DHS entity that FOIA fan recommended. But how long do I gotta wait for a response to that? Do you
Oh,
think?
dude, you're never gonna get those, but it's awesome that you did it.
Damn, maybe I'll have to take DHS to court then.
No, I mean it's really awesome that you did that and you stepped up and put them in, and
It was really easy. Everyone should do it.
Everybody should do it, but yeah, I haven't actually gotten anything back from DHS yet.
Interesting.
I know it does update once it's assigned for processing, and it'll give you a timeline. So I think my first one, I want to say it's scheduled to be processed in June. But they are a little bit more clunky. Everybody with the federal government, all the agencies are pretty clunky and slow to respond, and they push back really hard on stuff. So hopefully you'll probably get an email here in a couple weeks, and they'll give you like a status update, like a confirmation that it's been like assigned for processing. So it'll be a while, but it will get processed. It'll probably be processed within a year. So that's awesome.
Hey, I just can't wait. I did have another question though. I was thinking about Chris Steele, and I remember Durham impaneled the court in the UK, right? And I don't remember whatever happened with that. I just didn't know if you remembered what happened with all that stuff. If he actually ever got documents or a deposition.
Yeah. So I'm doing this one from memory, so don't hold me to anything. But I want to say it was December 2020 or December 2019. It was one of those years. And Durham enlisted the help of like a law firm in Britain to kind of force Steele to do something. And they basically weren't going to do that. But what came of that was Steele agreed to hand over his notes related to Alpha Bank stuff. And the Alpha Bank notes did come to Durham, and I don't know what was in them that hasn't been released or anything. But that was used as part of Durham's investigation, I'm sure. But beyond that, I don't know that Durham's gotten anything. I don't know if those efforts continued to force him to, sit for a deposition or cooperate. But yeah, Durham did get a little bit, but other than that, I didn't think it sounded too promising. So,
do you think if he's not going to get indicted, do you think he'll try and get him to testify?
I think Steele's going to get indicted.
You think so? Foy fan said he didn't think Steele be indicted, but Simpson probably.
I think Simpson and Steele will probably be indicted. I don't know that they'll get Steele extradited.
Probably a 101 charge, 1001.
Yeah, I want to say. I mean, yeah, it's hard to predict. I try to stay away from doing predictions. I could see other charges, but it's hard to say, right? I mean, when you actually look through Steele and like his Alpha Bank deposition is out there, I have it in my link tree, and it's kind of weird because he's actually pretty honest when he's under oath. Like he doesn't hold a whole lot back, and it's really unfortunate. In the Alpha Bank case, when he was deposed, the investigators didn't know as much as we know now. They didn't know anywhere close, and you actually have Steele telling the truth, and then these British investigators are kind of hammering on stuff, and it's like, no, he's actually telling the truth. So
that sucks.
It's kind of weird, and there are some good points out of that deposition, but unfortunately, I mean, if the investigators knew what we know now, it would be a really interesting thing to see.
If only.
Yeah.
So 2 things I think is going to happen. Well, one thing, like Steele might get like indicted, but like the same judges, it's Amy Barrett or whatever, who does the Julian Assange extradition. she is not going to be falling. Oh no, she actually said she was good on Assange, like keeping him back. But he has been around too many London social clubs. No way, but he's getting it like extradited to the United States, even if he gets like charges pressed in EVDA or whatever. That's just not happening. And if you're a prosecutor like Durham, you're like, no. It the political ramifications of trying to extradite an ex MI6 head of Russian station, Moscow station, to the UK. You're gonna have to like give up the lady who ran over that person out in Norfolk or whatever. I just don't see that happening.
That didn't stop Mueller from indicting all those Russians and Russian companies for basically political show.
Yeah, but we all know that you can't like extradite people from Russia.
Yeah,
But,
obviously.
but the UK apparently you can, but it has to go through some judicial process.
Oh, so if he's like indicted, it would automatically start that?
Well, no, you can indict the GRU, so apparently the advanced APT people, so advanced persistent threat people 28, 29, and like, I'm sorry if I'm wrong on this, but apparently the APT, and this all goes back to Rodney Joff, CrowdStrike, this lot, it's like the APT, I think according to Walker is this advanced persistent threat whereby you're not just within the internet ascribing a random, like, oh, it might be Russian. They're actually taking it down to a person at an IP address which they've somehow got around the VPN, and it is an actual person. So, and this is something I'd always like. I always thought like APT 28 and 29, Fancy and Cozy Bear. I just thought, oh well, they attributed them to the Ukrainians or the Russians or whatever. I don't know. The people who did the DNC hack, they were somehow attributed to Russian people. But Walker Fire, I think, in a tweet a while back, he said that no, this APT is actually attributing them to an individual, a like £400 hacker behind a computer at behind a VPN wherever, but they could attribute it to somebody who was there and doing it rather than, oh yeah, it's just the Russians. And so that APT, the APT that Joffe and all that lot were doing, the Greek guys at Georgia Tech.
Well,
this was trying to like pin it to a person in a place. Now, and I was thinking about this, like how do you pin that to a person? And then I was listening to Rekieta Law last night, and how they pinned the kid who got 3 months jail rather than like 10 years or something, but how the FBI guys pinned his like sharing of like paedophile pornography, but the way they did it, they they didn't quite send something because it didn't, the file size didn't work or something. They needed another address, so they begin to like take these little bits of information and they build them up into this what is apparently an APT. So by and the cyber defenses in the US, they're basically okay. So we see this action. Can we link it to another? Can we extract something, make them do something that will like definitely identify them as this ABT, like this.
Willie, do you mind if I jump in with a
Yeah,
couple points? Yeah, so there's there's a lot going on there, right? So attribution is kind of like a blanket term that everybody's kind of throwing around. So it can mean different things based on who you're talking to and what's involved in that conversation. So there's a GRU attribution where um, you know you can say it, you think it's the Russians, and APT 28 you believe is Fancy Bear, which interchangeable terms. You think that's a military branch called the GRU. It's part of the Russian military, and there's a lot of elements to this, and I'll probably miss a few, but um, you have CrowdStrike and the FBI going in, and they're analyzing the hack, and their sensors are immediately saying, allegedly, that the Russians are involved with this hack. So you have some indications there. We don't know what's in the CrowdStrike reports, but at some point they conclude that it was the Russians that hacked the DNC. And they put that out on June 14th, 2016. Now, right around that same time, when they were going public saying it was the Russians, they were actually just giving the files to the FBI. So the FBI hadn't done any analysis yet. And if you actually look at those June 14th stories really closely, you'll see like the government is not really on board with this. So the government's attribution to Russia came in October 2016, and there are some reports from DNI out there that attribute it to Russia. And then there's another attribution, and this is kind of the point that I think you're making. How do you go from saying, well, it's the GRU to saying, okay, it's these 12 individuals? And that's a point that we still have to flush out a little bit. And I think it's really interesting and important to keep in mind that, a few months ago, we got a Bloomberg article, and this was December 2021, just a few months ago, that indicated that Ilya Sachkov and Sergei Mikhailov had some role in helping the U.S. government basically attribute these attacks. And I found that really interesting because, um, you know, these are people that are helping attribute it to the GRU, and there's a lot of animosity between the FSB and the GRU. They're competitive, the competing agencies over in Russia, so they don't get along, and they do have a long history of setting each other up. And the question that I had when I read those stories was, well, the technical data must not have been that strong, right? If you need human reporting to tell you who was involved with this hack, then the technical analysis must not have been that strong. It must not have been that conclusive. And one other point that you just alluded to as well was Rodney Joffe. And we've gotten indications about Rodney Joffe or Manos and this group from Georgia Tech being involved with some degree of analysis with the DNC hack. And not going to get too far ahead of a few things that are coming, but there are some indications, and there's a big, big discrepancy right now where we have communications from Manos as part of these email chains and FOIA, where Manos is saying, yeah, I was tasked to look at Guccifer, who was, of course, like the front that was releasing these documents hacked from the DNC. And DARPA is saying, no, we didn't task Manos. And that becomes really important because, you know, that's like a strong indication that there's like a deeper layer here. If Manos thinks he was tasked by DARPA and DARPA saying, no, we didn't task him, then what happened to the data and the analysis from Manos? Where did that go? What did those people do with it? And we're going to find out a little bit more. And there'll be a story coming in a few days that helps clean that up a little bit. But there is a major story there, and there's a major investigation that's needed to get to the bottom of that. And I see we have Walk of Fire in here. So, Walk of Fire, if you want to speak, man, we'd love to hear your thoughts either on DNC attribution stuff, or we were talking about the Trump lawsuit today. And if you want to jump in on either topic, I mean, you can talk about anything, Walk of Fire. You can do literally anything. We can talk about rainbows if you want.
Oh,
yeah, there we go. What's going on, Walk of Fire? I make it mandatory for Walk of Fire to speak when he comes in.
Well, hey, good. I was just planning to talk about rainbows today. No, I
Fantastic.
Appreciate being asked to speak. I don't want to interfere with the train of thought that everyone's already on. I just popped in maybe 1 or 2 minutes ago, but I'll sit here, and if I've got something to contribute, I will certainly do so.
There you go, folks. I mean, now is your chance. If you have any questions or comments, if there's anything you ever wanted to know about Russiagate, you have somebody here that can provide you an answer. So don't be bashful. Go ahead and ask anything you want.
Yeah, I had a quick question just on the timeline for the DNC hack. What weight do you or anyone on the call give to the FBI reaching out to the DNC in November 2015, suggesting that Russians are on the DNC systems and servers? I know it was brought up by the DNC IT contractor in Yurid Wold Johannes testified before Congress, saying that the FBI was first contacting the DNC back in November 2015, sort of raising the flag that Russians are on their system. Whether or not that's Russian, I mean, again, attack or attribution strategy is a bit difficult to pin down, but just if that's been explored in any more detail by you guys, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a great question, and unfortunately, it's really not one that we have a whole lot more information on. I mean, there's one question that we were kind of posing a few weeks ago. I mean, you had public reporting indicates that both Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear were involved with hacks, and Cozy Bear is the one that you're referencing that was involved back to 2015, and they were there. And as far as has been reported, we don't know of any information that was exfiltrated or disseminated by Cozy Bear. Fancy Bear is the one that is popularly known, and that happened in April, and they got in the system and they exfiltrated a bunch of documents from the DNC. Now, a question that I had a few weeks ago was, how can you tell us that it was Fancy Bear and not Cozy Bear, right? I mean, what level of analysis or detail is there that you can attribute it to one and not the other? But yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's a little bit. I went a little bit off topic there with that one. And Walk of Fire, if you have anything, happy to hear your thoughts on it. I mean, I don't know, what bearing it really has. I know at some point it prompted the DNC to upgrade their firewall because they were concerned enough about it. But they never really found anything, and then all of a sudden in April it blew up into a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have read, Yared or Yared, however you say his name. I've read his transcript several times because I find the whole lead up to, I guess, about March 2016, where the official, Fancy Bear starting to fish Podesta and everything. But I find everything before that fascinating. I can think of lots of interesting conspiratorial theories about what was going on. But of course, there's just so little evidence and proof and primary source documents out there to really know what's going on, other than a few news stories and some of those transcripts. And the FBI is doing everything they can to keep everything as locked down as they can. I just saw it was, I think today, maybe yesterday, something about someone's got a FOIA request out there for FBI files related to the DNC hack, and it looks like they reviewed 500 pages and withheld all 500 pages in full for this month's release. So they're finding anything they can to keep it as locked down as possible. So whether that means that there's something bigger, there's something that ties it all together with a bow, or we, as much as we want to jump on everyone's a horrible person, maybe there wasn't anything there, and so the FBI is withholding all this stuff because it's all technically private. There can be bias, there can be all sorts of reasons, but what makes it tough is that we don't know anything because they're withholding any sort of indication saying here's why this could have been related or innocent, or here's why this is a major scandal.
Well, it's also particularly interesting to me the fact that Yurid testified that they were unable to find any evidence of Russians on their systems from November until April. And then suddenly in April it pops up and, now they are able to identify Russians.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. It's weird, even their innocent story of we can't find anything, and FBI comes back to them several times. I think the first visit or phone call was back in August or September of 2015. And they keep saying, no, we don't know anything. But then the FBI comes back and says, no, yes, here's more indications. Here's something's happening. It's not clear on whether Yurid was getting that information up to the top. Some stories say no one was told. And then other stories will say, yeah, they went straight to the top and everyone was talking about it and they couldn't find anything. It's very, very weird. One thing that I've found is very interesting to look at is the FBI, according to Yurid's transcript, got real involved about mid-April, and they were having to stage and transmit some log files and everything to the FBI somehow securely. And if you look at that and cross-reference it with the Mueller report about the dates and when the GRU was supposedly stealing files from the DNC, it's very, very interesting to see how these two things, or were they two things, all happening at the same time.
Hey, Walk, what's the earliest attributed date when Hillary and the Hillary campaign started concocting their scheme to, hey, let's tag Donald Trump as a Russian agent? I know I think it was during the mid-year review, try to get back at Trump, but it sure seems like it's around that mid-spring of 16, about the same time that everybody's wondering, wow, why did they start this? They didn't see the Russians in the system. No, all of a sudden in April, they do see the Russians in the system. Yeah, I'm just wondering what the closeness of the dates are for when Hillary started putting together her scheme that John Brennan talked about to tag Trump as a Russian agent.
Well, that report that John Brennan talks about at the end of July of 2016 is technically, the first confirmed time that we hear that, we know that. I would say probably you can look at I think it's February 19th or something, email talking about the Trump Swift boat project, and we need to be ready to move on that. That could mean something else, but it very it certainly seems like it is talking about tagging him with Russia. The other thing I'll say is, you can find lots of dates that seem to line up together. There's only a certain amount of days in a year, and you can say, well, this happened the same day as this, and this happened the same day as that, so they must be related. And lots of times they are, but lots of times they're not. But that's why we need Durham to keep, indicting or at least filing some more stuff so that we can finally start checking some of these things off our list. Yes, that's what they were talking about. No, they were talking about something else. Okay. And so we can really start honing in on what exactly did happen.
Can I just interrupt at a moment? Sorry for the frog in my throat, but the ATP 28 and 29 were first identified in the Ukrainian battlefield originally, and then they got sort of repurposed because it was GRU and whatever. They got repurposed via Dmitry I can never pronounce the surname, Alperovich or whatever. So these APTs are things which like it's not Q-tip. It's something like, oh God Almighty, there's a load of like internet companies which share these hacking like vulnerabilities, and they share them around. This is what part of Joffrey was about. Is part of what the Greeks in Georgia Tech or DARPA or Microsoft or whatever. There is a distinct group of people who work out whether their systems, whether the internet as a whole is being attacked. But we're talking about APT 28 and 29. So if you chunk back from there, there has to be an APT 1. I presume they don't use 0, but APT 1 was a Chinese attributed persistent threat or advanced persistent threat that they identified. So if you take from when they identified ATP 28 and 29, which I think was in originally in the Donbass, the Ukrainian theatre of war, probably in 2016 or 20, I don't know, between 2014 and 2016, and they've taken the style of hacking or whatever, and they said, yeah, that's definitely them. But previous to that, there is another 25 APTs, and this is coming from the same attribution group that Joff is part of, that the Greeks in Georgia Tech are part of. And it's going back to APT 1 or whatever in China. So this APT, this attribution, which is a bit sketchy, to be quite honest, but you say, well, they use these certain types of hacking tools, therefore they must be this, or they must come from that VPN. This advanced attribution, like to say that those hackers on the World Wide Web, or sorry, internet, to pin it down to them people. That's a really hard thing to do. And I think that's what the Greeks at Georgia Tech were trying to do, Joffrey was trying to do. And then I think they went astray.
Yeah, I mean, a lot going on there, right? But yeah, I mean, to your point, FireEye, I think, was the first to identify Fancy Bear, and that was in 2014. And there is a little bit of dispute out there. I don't think there's too much to it where there's a little bit of dispute about whether it's actually a Russian group. I mean, there's no real confirmation other than, the company seems to operate during time zones in Russia, and they seem to carry out missions that are uh, against Russian enemies, more or less. And I mean, to your point, which I think is a good one, I mean, a lot of the attribution analysis that gets done is sources and methods. So if you're an analyst, a cybersecurity analyst, and you say, well, this group does these techniques and it's pretty common to them, every group's going to have their signature. I mean, technically you could just replicate that, right? I mean, if you're really good at what you were doing, you would just replicate it, and then all of a sudden you're Fancy Bear, right? So the attribution analysis without technical backing seems to be pretty limited, and it's hard to draw too many conclusions about a group, let alone, I imagine, trace it to specific individuals. So I think that's a good point. Draft Guru, I'm going to add you as speaker. Mario, if you're still here, I was going to add you, but looks like you're gone. So, Draft Guru, how's it going? Draft Guru, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
How's it going?
Yeah, I just want to know, can he get the Alpha Bank lawyers?
Can I get them? Like on the chat?
No. The lawsuit.
Like the depositions and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a curiosity that we have. But yeah, technically, my understanding is they could just release those documents. So anything that's not in the public domain right now, they could theoretically just dump out there. So, I don't have any connections with them to ask for them, but we'd certainly welcome those if they wanted to dump them out there. Alrighty. Anybody got anything else?
I got a question for Walk of Fire.
Yeah, there you go.
What do you think the next public step in terms of investigation is going to be? We've seen him start to dismantle Steel Source Network and him go after the Alpha Bank stuff. What do you think is going to come next? And do you think there's going to be anything surprising, like that we weren't expecting, or what do you think?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I guess we've seen 3 indictments total. Kevin Kleinsmith, and then Sussman and Danchenko, and they all seem to be completely unrelated. How many different strings of investigation does Durham have? Who knows? It could be something against someone in the intelligence community about the hacking and everything. It could be someone in Hillary's campaign. It could be just that we get more in the Hillary or in the Danchenko and Sussman indictments. He's been doing a good job with his filings and giving us some information there. And the things that we've learned from both of those indictments are they're huge. They're huge chunks of the story that we had no clue even happened. all sorts of new characters being introduced to the saga. So who knows? It'd be nice to get something that wraps up some stuff that we've all had questions on for a while. But at the same time, he could just blow all of our minds with some crazy other aspect that was going on that we had no idea about. And it'd be really fun if some of the theories that lots of us throw out on Twitter every day that seem unconnected to reality would be confirmed. I mean, that would be fun, I guess is not quite the right word. But who knows? I mean, I'm anxious to see what he has. I'm apprehensive that he's going up against quite the machine there in Washington, especially with all this Ukraine stuff going on. I mean, Ukraine, in my opinion, is a huge part of all of this. And, oh, sorry, you were going to indict someone or file something talking about how Ukraine was involved. Well, we can't do that right now because we all have to stand behind Ukraine. So you got to hold off on that for a while. I mean, that's a big, big hurdle for him to overcome. Not because it takes it from the political spectrum to the actual national security spectrum. Kind of almost with some of this stuff with Jaffe. Jaffe's got his little side thing going that's all sealed, where he's trying to get all the references to him stricken from Sussman's, from all the pleadings in Sussman's case. Probably he's just trying to weasel out of it, but it's all sealed. We don't know. I mean, this could implicate all sorts of things. So he's got a very tight line that he's got to walk, and hopefully we get a lot of good answers, and just how he chooses to give those to us will be quite interesting.
Thank you. And do you think he's restricted by the size of his team? He might not be able to handle like as many like cases at once. So taking it piece by piece, or do you think the size of his team can impact the speed?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, you get something too big, and you've got a lot more potential for leaks. You've got a lot more potential for interference internally with the team. You get it too small, and you've got some issues analyzing and getting through all the facts that you're looking at. I was just able earlier today to listen to Lee Smith's first episode on Call-In, and he had Devin Nunes on, and I think they recorded that a few days ago. I encourage everyone to go listen. It's pretty quick, and it's a good conversation. But Nunes talked about how the American people, those of us out here that dig on these things, that look at these things, were a tremendous help to him and his investigation in the House, because there was just so much stuff to go through and wade through, and he would see some of the stuff that we would find, and it would help point them in the right direction, or at least to remember where they read something, where they saw something. Wait a minute, I remember this, but I don't remember where I saw it. And they were able to use our research and analysis and grunt work to help push them in the right direction, or at least assist in that way. I don't want to try and act like we're able to direct investigations because we're finding things necessarily that others with a ton more data are able to find, but maybe we are here and there, and those are the little things that count. So sorry I got a little long-winded there, but I think Durham's been doing this a long time. He knows the right size of his team for the type of investigation that he has. If he needs more, he can always request more and get some more. If he needs less, or people one aspect of the investigation comes to an end, then people leave his team, and I think he's not going to let that be a hindrance to what he needs to dig into.
Thank you.
I think like Durham wants to keep his team tight. Like there's no leaks. It's I I don't know. I'm trying to work out how many people he has in his team, but I I'm guessing less than 10 because Muller, that was a huge like 80 lawyer thing, and there's a load of leaks. There's nothing come out of Durham. The only thing we ever see out of Durham is his speaking indictments. They just like he files an indictment and he explains what he's doing, and in part, I think that he's also begging for, not begging, that's the wrong word, but he's also giving the green light for us to carry on our investigations, the same investigations that led Nunes and Cash and whatever, and the same OSINT stuff, which is ongoing. And I don't think they have the resources within a Merrick Garland like DOJ. They're just not going to get that, and which made me thought when they launched this Trump lawsuit today, and it's maybe saying, well, you guys need to get involved because we definitely know that the well, we know that Devin Nunes comes on and listens here, and various other people, because to be quite honest, a lot of the people on here have done a lot of the legwork, which pre Durham should have been done by the DOJ. And I think they all appreciate everybody doing this, like, and finding little links, which maybe Durham, as a small, tight team, doesn't have the capacity to do. And I think anybody on here, anybody listening, appreciate that you're here, that you're interested, because, well, somebody has to be.
Hey, Walk, I had a follow-up question. I mean, you brought up Ukraine having implications on slowing down Durham's investigation. I hear Ukraine referenced a lot with Russiagate. Alexandra Chalupa, or maybe that's not how you pronounce it, comes to mind. But who else do you tie from Ukraine to exactly what went down?
Well, I mean, you've got Konstantin Kalimnik, Manafort's associate, that really ties him in a lot. And when you really start digging into it, you mentioned Chalupa, she ties into Manafort, and it seems like there was a lot of push from Ukrainian officials or non that were out to get Manafort for one, but you have. It's hard to look at Ukrainian politics and say, okay, well, that party is the one that aligns with the Democrats, and that party is the one that aligns with the Republicans. That's not America. It's a different country with different politics and a lot of upheaval in the last decade. So both parties here had lots of connections to lots of different parties over there. I'll put it over there. I'll put it that way. You've got lots of people trying to undermine other people. For them, Trump and Hillary are almost just pawns in their game because they're looking out for their country, which is understandable. So you see Ukraine pop up a lot for some of those reasons, because of their history and conflict with Russia. They're trying to undermine Russia. militarily, propaganda, all of that. And who are they trying to convince when they're using this propaganda? Not necessarily their own people. A lot of it is the Western world, NATO, the U.S. I mean, all of us. So you've got a lot of foreign interference, you could say, coming from Russia, coming from Ukraine, coming from all over the place, and you see it pop up with, let's see, the Podesta hack. Supposedly was from a Ukraine address. Lots of the hackers and everything, anti-Russia hackers, pro-Russia hackers. Lots of them are based in Ukraine. You see it pop up with, like we mentioned, Manafort, Black Ledger, all of that. They even kind of semi-admit it in that January 2017 article by Ken Vogel. Then they backtrack and everyone says, no, that's not what that article meant. But then a court over in Ukraine found, I think it was in 2018 or 19, determined that some of the officials over there did interfere with the U.S. election. But then they turn around and say that court was corrupt. So it's hard to say who's who on all of this. You can also look at the first Trump impeachment. He called Zelensky over there, said there's stuff with CrowdStrike and a server over there in Ukraine. I hope you get to the bottom of it. Does Trump always know everything that's going on? Not necessarily. He could have been, and the narrative is that he was just, regurgitating right-wing crazy theories from the internet. Then again, he's also the president of the United States. Maybe he knows a little bit more about what happened than we do. So maybe there was something there. Who knows? It's hard to say. The problem is, as from either side, it all makes sense of, oh, he was about to undermine and blow up this whole conspiracy. So that's why they had to rush to impeach him. And the other side saying he's spouting off these conspiracy theories and he's that's messing up foreign relations. And not only that, he's trying to get him to look into Joe Biden, and that's interference. I mean, the more you see people try and be anti-corruption, the more you realize both sides are all corrupt. And Ukraine is right in the middle of all of that.
Hey, Walk, I think it was last year, the FBI raided a couple of office buildings, one in Cleveland of all places. I think the other one was down in Florida. They belonged to a Ukrainian oligarch. And of course, the news media was trying to link it to Rudy. So they made the oligarch out to be the most evil person in the world, and he was despicable and horrible. And boy, you can't wait to find out what happened. And I pushed the story around a couple times, but that whole thing went into a giant black hole. Never heard a word about the hundreds of boxes of evidence that they rolled out the front doors on the TV cameras when they thought they could tie it to Rudy. And then it just went away. It was gone.
Yeah. I know I can't even say the surface level of all the backstory with that oligarch. I believe it's Kolominsky or something similar to that. As I got deeper and deeper into digging into Spygate, Russiagate, however we call it, I realized pretty quick that there are whole avenues and pieces of this thing that no one can keep all in their head. And so I will say about Ukraine, like the Ukraine politics, I don't know a lot of that. I don't know a lot of the backstory with who these oligarchs and politicians are. Again, because they seem to be connected to both sides so much. You've got people that were donating all this money to Hillary, and then it turns out they were also donating it to Trump. So, they're playing all these sides. So I don't know that much about Rudy and Lev Parnas and whoever the other guy was that got indicted with all of, that sort of claim of interference. Most of the whole impeachment thing. I rolled my eyes when it started and didn't really follow all the details that much like others on here. I'm trying to look through who's listening in. That might be a good one. I see quite a few, so I'm not going to call anyone out. But if anyone else wants to take this one, go for it, because I'm not an expert on the Ukrainian politicians front.
Yeah, so the Kolomirsky is one of the oligarchs, and he's a private bank guy. And then there's the other guy who was partner with him, who ended up Burisma, who ended up paying $83,000 to Hunter Biden. But Kolomirsky is the sort of he's the yeah, you're right. It's so complex. It's but Kolomirsky and I forget the other guy's name, but they're the two major ones. I think Kolomirsky, through his media company, is the guy who has supported the current president of the Ukraine, or prime minister. I have no idea what he is, but the guy who plays the piano with his penis. And it's all about corruption. It's similarly with Russia as well. It's like they're reigning in the oligarchs of Russia. The Abramovich is the Khodorkovsky's. Anybody who's ever made money in Ukraine, in Russia, which are like resource riches places. This is an old game. It's been going on for years. It's since 1991 or 97, whenever you describe when the end of the Soviet Union happened. Who got to take over tokens of the ex USSR, and who got to be made an oligarch? Like he, because you have to understand that when we stopped the communism, then everybody got a bit of a paper token saying, "Oh, you own a bit of like Rusal or any oil company," but that doesn't mean anything. So they then sold that to people who actually had money, and the people who had money are the people who are basically gangsters, and so that's where the oligarchs came from. And it wasn't just in Russia; it's also within Ukraine. And these natural resources, the tokens you got given for getting out of communism, well, you want to sell them for like hard cash, and that's how the oligarchs came about. So you push forward like 30 years, and they're buying football teams in like the UK or yachts everywhere. Now that's all been taken away from them. All the riches that the Russians, the Ukrainians have like built up over that time, or the oligarchs have, has all just been swept away from them. You have people like searching about for the yachts, or that's quite scary. But there's also Ukrainian oligarchs, and the Ukrainian oligarchs who are very closely Russian oligarchs. This is where we get to like the people like Olga Galkina, Igor Danchenko's relations. It's all intermingled, but it's about who runs Ukraine, and and I don't know how long I've been saying about this, but the whole Spygate thing is all about Ukraine. It's always been about Ukraine. It's the Chalupas, the Andrei Telechenkos, it's McCain, Lindsey Graham. It's all about this like fungible border, which was Ukraine, like from NATO into Russia, and basically Putin's gone, well, no, uh, I don't really want that border there, and he's now gone to war.
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine's certainly a large part of RussiaGate, and got a lot more to learn about the Black Book that uh, served as a predicate for the investigation into Manafort. So, yeah,
I have a
hopefully,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
Isn't anything about Igor Danachenko about to come out next week?
I think I saw a story today, and I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. I don't believe any documents are being released. Now, um, Durham is going to give Danchenko and his defense team a whole bunch of classified documents, but Durham's not going to release those documents. It's just he's getting them declassified so that he can give them to Danchenko to prepare his defense. So I wouldn't expect us to see anything on that.
Also, I have a question. Do you
Yeah,
think he committed visa fraud?
visa fraud. Um, I mean, I don't know the legalities of it and whether it's how to how it'd be prosecuted. I mean, he was part of some type of money laundering scheme so that he could maintain U.S. based employment, but in reality, he was getting paid by Orbis Intelligence and they were laundering payments through Target Labs. So yeah, I mean, it's probably not ideal, but I don't see him actually getting prosecuted for that. I don't even know what the statute of limitations are, but I imagine they're pretty well expired by now.
Speaking of that, one of the things we were joking about was, well, can't Durham go back to Danchenko and tell him, hey, look, we could just deport you back to Russia, and maybe you'll get drafted and end up fighting in Ukraine. So make a decision. But apparently he's too old for that. But that was one of the things I was thinking about too. Is we were talking about whether Steele was going to be indicted and how that would be difficult and et cetera. But I think it's been really hard to build this conspiracy case that we're all talking about if you get Danchenko on one side and you've got Fusion and everybody else on the other side, and not have Steele he's a big cog in this wheel, and if he's not indicted or at least brought as a witness and forced to cooperate somehow, I think it's really hard to connect all these dots.
What about like financial documents from Orbis?
I just don't think you're gonna ever get Steele like extradited from the UK to the US. Like it's taken how long to get Assange to get extradited from UK to US?
Well,
And
I
he's
think it kind of depends on how aggressive Durham wants to be. I mean, if the British they're gonna go with the path of least resistance, and if documents start getting thrown out there that implicates the British in this scheme, and the British have a lot of questions to answer for their role and what they knew. I mean, if they start getting embarrassed in there, they might hand over Steele. I mean, I wouldn't put it outside the realm of possibilities, but if everything stays pretty well sealed, and then they indict Steele, yeah, maybe it's a little bit harder to get him extradited. I saw that somebody over there brought him in for a talk a couple weeks ago to get his thoughts as the expert on Russia in connection to the Ukrainian invasion. So I don't know. I don't have a good feeling of how well liked he is over there or disliked. But
it's not happening. It's literally not happening. There's no way that Steele, an ex MI5 agent, is going to get extradited to the US. Assange was an MI6 or whatever.
It depends. I mean, if he's indicted in a conspiracy and people start going to prison here, and just a mountain of documents come out that implicates the British, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, it's hard to predict these things, of course, and a lot of it will depend on who's president and how far they're willing to go to kind of enforce that. I think, but I wouldn't put it out. I wouldn't rule it out. I think, I think I read somewhere that Steele used to like to visit the United States. I think he had like a vacation home here at one point. So I don't know. I mean, Steele might decide to come forward and just cooperate and just try to cut a deal that includes no prison time, and they might give him that. I mean, if he can,
that would be great. That would be
yeah.
great.
I mean, if he can connect some dots that Durham can't connect without his testimony, he'll get a deal, and I think Steele might be open to that. I mean, he he's not going to want to be a pariah. I mean, even if they, I think he wants to come out of this ahead, and if he can push the blame on Danchenko, which is a real possibility, and push it on Danchenko and Clinton, and kind of extricate himself from the situation, I think he might consider doing something like that.
But you also have to understand that, like, maybe Steele and MI6 or whatever, and they're looking into Russia and Ukraine. They're literally, like, Danchenko and his subsource network is literally the intelligence they have. That's a possibility, and he could have been doing it all in good faith. I I could see that, but then you worry about, well, the intelligence around Ukraine and Russia right now. But if that's the best they ever had, was Danchenko as a subsource, I don't really worry about that. I really do.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and give Vicky a chance to ask a question. She's been really patient, and then Durham, I see you've been here for a while too. So, Vicky, if you want to go ahead and I don't know if you have a question or comment, but go ahead. I'm sorry, Vicky, are you there? Vicky, you might have something wrong with your microphone. I don't think you're coming through. Sorry, Vicky. If you wanna take another shot with that, Durham, why don't you go ahead?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, first and foremost, all you guys that have been putting in so much work on this stuff, I'm so grateful for everything you've done and for creating this space as well. It's totally awesome.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that.
My comment, sorry, I just got here to the party, so I don't know what's been spoken about earlier tonight, but I'm just so excited about the Trump civil lawsuit. I had completely overlooked the civil angle, and you look at the list of defendants there, and I mean, it's just great. I can only imagine how this is going to dovetail with what Durham's already been doing, because he can use all the stuff that Durham's been finding, all the stuff that this group has been bringing forward, and wow, discovery is going to be awesome in that civil case. So I just wanted to bring that up and see what your commentary was on that, and if you share my excitement. That's about it. I'm gonna unmute my mic.
Yeah, so I think we kind of kicked off the chat with that, and it's. I think I share your excitement on the whole. I mean, I'm happy to see Trump get into the fray a little bit, but I'm not real clear on his expectations. And I think I presented the possibility. I mean, if Trump's goal is just to force this into the media conversation and get some media attention on this, I think that's a job well done. And there's nothing wrong with that. And, with Durham probably doing a few more indictments here relatively soon, I think that's important for him to do. I think that's great. And if that's all he was intending, I think that's fine. Now, if he wants to get to discovery, um, I was going to kind of let the lawyers speak to that a little bit more. In DMs, certain things were pointed out to me where, the filing as it is right now probably is insufficient. I think there's going to be some problems, and it's going to be a pretty lengthy process before he even gets to the discovery phase, if he does. But first and foremost, I think they would have to do an amended filing or an addendum and try to add in some more details. So there's like a 4-year statute of limitations. I don't know if that's the right terminology for it, but there's got to be a predicate act within the last 4 years. And the filing, I just scanned it. I didn't really read it too thoroughly. I don't think it really enunciated any predicate acts within the last 4 years. So they could certainly clean that up. I think there's a few things they could point to, but that would be one thing they have to clean up. And then there were a few mistakes and a few sloppy errors, and you don't want to see that, particularly in your initial filing. There wasn't stuff that wasn't necessarily wrong, other than them describing a few things as a hack when it really isn't supported. But there's some things that just aren't supported by public reporting and knowledge as it is right now.
Gotcha. In that case, I haven't actually read it. So, but if that's what you're saying, then I'm going to go with what's behind door number 2. And I'm going to guess that Trump is wagering that the benefit of bringing this forward to have a media talking point at this stage is worth it, whether he wins or loses. And I agree with that assessment. So, cool stuff. You guys keep up the good work, and lots of love.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean,
Hey,
I
Ryan.
don't think Trump's really after money, right? I think he's after getting some answers and maybe some media attention on this, which is good.
Just to Durham's point right there, I just did a quick scan of the document, Control F, just for 2018. The only act that they have listed is for Felipe Reigns for the 2018 tweet on April 16th.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I think it broke up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. The only thing that they have in the filing for 2018 is Felipe Reigns for his tweet about collusion, yes, collusion, yes, collusion.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be enough. But yeah, I mean, I think they have to do an amended filing if they're serious about getting to the discovery phase. That's my opinion, and I'm a layman. I'm not a lawyer or a source of a knowledge on this. Like, Walk of Fire, if you want to weigh in, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. You don't have to. No pressure.
Well, so I am not a big expert on, statute of limitations, and certainly not RICO and all that. It was an interesting filing. I skimmed it. I think I read the entire, however many pages it was, 100 pages or something crazy like that, in about 3 minutes. So I did not, really give it a deep dive or anything yet. But just on its face, I was kind of worried about some allegations that are in there as fact that weren't quite accurate, at least not from what we've seen, or at least not alleged anywhere as fact other than here. I worry that this was fired off a little quickly, which then makes me wonder why. Why are they filing it now? What's happening here? Is this supposed to help Durham somehow? Is this going to hinder Durham? I don't know. I find it interesting that it was in 2017, maybe 2018. The DNC sued Trump and his campaign and about the same number of 100 individuals or whatever, and they used that kind of as their own speaking indictment, you could almost say, kind of like what's going on here. Here's where we're going to put it all together. It's not a news article or anything. It's our chance to really put it all together and show the public. Whether it accomplishes that, I don't know. Same with the DNC filing. There were some little bits and pieces in there that people ran with, but eventually it just petered out. I think it took a year or longer for them to get everyone properly served and um, just just get the thing off the ground, and that's probably going to happen here. You've got 20, 30, maybe more than that defendants, and each one's going to try and push back on just being properly served. That's going to take forever. So I'm not quite sure what to think of it. Um, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I worry that it could be detrimental to Durham's investigation, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you had some good points there, and I think I share some of the concerns that you raised. And yeah, well, I mean, we'll see what happens. Maybe this is the straw that tips Joffrey over into cooperating. Right? Maybe he feels the pressure and he runs to John Durham tomorrow morning and says, this is what happened. This is everything I know, and that would be nice. But
You
beyond that,
know, it
it could
could be
happen.
that these lawyers are trying to figure out everything and try and wrap their heads around the entire Russia Gate, which even all of us can't quite do. So, how best to get fact checkers to help them out? File this. We'll probably all tweet about how this is wrong or this isn't proven, and then they file an amended one once they can really get their head around it. I mean, that might be what's going on. Who knows?
I think that's the purpose of it, is to formulate or formalize what Trump and his lawyers have been observing, watching what's happening, and but I don't see it's going to increase the speed at which Durham happens. So that's my first initial question was, well, how do you get involved in that lawsuit? Do we become amicus curiae or whatever, like friends of the court? Because probably a lot of the people indicted there is from our research. I don't know. It's an interesting timing. Like, how do we get involved, or is the lawsuit being put out by people who aren't in Trump's best behavior, like looking out for the Trump, just putting that lawsuit out so that it delays everything. I you We have to have these questions going on all the time, because the same way as like the lawyers he chose, like post election 2020, and they're not that good. And then you look at the lawyers now, we need to research this, because, or who's advising him to put a civil lawsuit in, which might preclude anything in the Durham investigation. I don't know. These are questions. I have no answers, but
It sounded like all the lawyers agreed that this was going to be a slow process under the best of circumstances. And if it butted up against Durham, it was going to be stayed, because obviously you can't bring these people in that are potentially under indictment or witnesses and have them interviewed because they're going to take the fifth or whatever. So it shouldn't interfere, at least as I understand it, and the lawyers have kind of said. So is it a publicity? I don't want to say stunt, but is it to bring attention to it? That's probably a good point. But the thing I worry about is, some of the stuff with Trump, things turn out like the Giuliani things after the election that end up being sort of a clown show. And does that muddy the political waters? Because at the end of the day, Durham's still under the thumb of the attorney general. And if they decided, if this thing got kind of politicized enough and crazy enough, and that they could pull the plug and just say, oh, this whole thing it's just it's Trump and it's political, and we're pulling the plug because it's just not, there's no case here. And that's the biggest fear, is that, it's always been our worry that that Garland could come along under enough pressure and just say, okay, this thing's over. We're cutting the cord, and he's got the power to do it. And yeah, then the Republicans can make a big stink about it. But yeah, good luck with that, right?
Yeah, no,
I'm not
that's what I
sure.
think.
I was just gonna say, like, I don't think there's enough. Um, Biden can't handle anything more right now. Like, if if Garland did that, and obviously we're only a few months away from the midterms, like, it would just be a nightmare, right? I mean, one more scandal, Biden's approval's already at 30%. Like, it would just be a nightmare in the midterms. So I don't know that I'm all that worried about it, especially with 3 indictments and just a mountain of documents that we've gotten, and even the more recent stuff within the last couple of weeks. I mean, the stuff that Mario Cleveland's been putting out is just amazing. And uh, if Durham if Durham were to get shut down by Garland, which I don't think it would happen. I mean, you're just talking about just a massive scandal, and that's something that would haunt the Democrats for decades. And think I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm just saying that this might make it easier because if it's a big smoke bomb that goes off, like the farther that Trump stays away from this, in my opinion, at this point, the better. Because let the legalities work themselves out. Let Durham do his thing. And I know it's really hard because it's been all these years, but the one the one guy that could blow this thing up politically is probably Donald Trump. That's just the reality of the media and everything else that could just get everybody together to say, oh, we've seen what happens when tech and the media get together and they say we're going to shut this thing down. Where it's Donald Trump that we have to not let him say what he's going to say. They can kind of do that, and that's fucked up and it's crazy. But if I had my druthers, I kind of think maybe Trump would stay away from this and let Durham do it. It might serve us all better.
I guess I would take the other side of it. I mean, nobody drives the story in the media like Donald Trump. I mean, the guy's been banned on social media for, 14, 15 months or whatever. And basically, he said nothing. And basically, he's done nothing. But he's still the lead story on CNN. He's still the lead story on MSNBC. And, if he actually got around to it and just spent a couple hours and just read it off a teleprompter and just said the right things, I mean, he could actually add some media attention on this, which I think would be good. I mean, if people, I say this all the time, so people, I'm sorry if you get annoyed, but if people knew what we know, this would be the largest story and the biggest story in American politics and in American media right now. I mean, this would be the number one story on every network every single night because there is a lot here. And obviously, it's a massive story and there's a lot of angles to it, but it goes deep too. I mean, there's some real inconsistencies that are out there, and for everybody that doesn't know what's going on and they point to something stupid, I mean, you can rip them apart with information that we have now, and there are so many questions that need to be asked and deserve to be asked. I mean, if they just read the same documents we did, they would read it. Like they would have to come to a conclusion that there is probably a conspiracy in operation, or there was, and there probably are some massive indictments still to come.
And that's true, but it's like we have to be careful about him getting over skis, like with the Rudy, the election stealing, etc. Like, yes, we are arbiters of the truth. I don't know, but we are. But we're closer to it than most. But do we want his media like? Because yeah, we're deep diving down on like everything which has gone on. I'm sure he has an overview, but does it want to be represented wrongly, or do we want to wait for Durham to actually like deliver the goods and drop some indictments? I'm not sure about that. yes, I like the fact that he's put a lawsuit in. It's deserving, but you know the time scales. It's years down the lines. Like we're another year and a half before we even get into discovery or something. Whereas with Durham, we're within, hopefully, well, no, we're not within the statute of limitations, but we're within months of the statute of limitations. So things are likely to happen which are actually criminal rather than,
Which statute is that?
well, yeah, so statute of limitations. I don't know, I started going on about them in 2018. I think January 18th, 20th of 2018, which was the, the 5 years that Hillary left State Department. And that was like the last time you could charge her. Because generally, like most crimes, the statute of limitations are 5 years. Like most federal crimes are 5 years. There's some 8 years and some 10 years and some 20 years. And like the 8, 10, and 20 years, they're all like you have to like kidnap somebody and do some violent shit to them and remember some life. But the only thing which changes that statute of limitations is that you have a conspiracy, but this RICO thing, which is really hard to prove. But as soon as you start covering up the act of the conspiracy, then that's when your statute of limitations starts again. So we could say that is the case with everything that has happened with Spygate, because we are going through the 5 years of statute of limitations for your normal federal, like lying to the FBI. That's why Sussman got done that time, is because that was just within the 5 year of statute of limitations, and we've been watching them go through, and we're now in March, so we're now equivalent March 2017, mid-March 2017, and I think we've gone through all the statute of limitations of when, like, all the lying. I'm not actually sure. Have we gone past when Jeffrey went to the CIA?
Yeah, so Joffe went to the CIA. I think it was February 2017, but there are plenty of overt acts. So there's a couple of things that I think we're conflating a little bit. So Trump filed a RICO lawsuit, and there's a 4-year statute of limitations on that. And there are some predicate acts out there that I can think of. And I pointed out, like, the July 2018 letter from the FBI to Congress basically saying, yeah, there's nothing wrong with Danchenko. We found him to be honest. And by that point, they'd interviewed him like 7 times, and they knew full well there was a lot of problems with him. So I would have pointed to that as a predicate act if I was doing the filing for the Trump lawsuit today. So I would think that's probably within statute of limitations. They might have had a little bit more time. And I think there's probably a few others as well they might be able to work with. To your point, on a criminal basis, it is generally pretty much a 5-year statute of limitations, depending on the crime. What we're looking at now is a conspiracy, and I don't think there's any question about it, at least for me, that there will be a conspiracy charged, and that goes 5 years from the last overt act of any conspirator. So anybody that you bring into the conspiracy, whatever overt act the last person makes is going to be like the basis for that 5-year statute of limitations. So, Rodney Joffe was actually also involved with the Daniel Jones investigation on the behalf of the Senate. So I don't even recall the date of when that report got turned in, but Joffe was involved with that and provided data and analysis and kind of did some coordinating with finding the right people to talk to. So I know that still has, I think, several months to go. I feel safe in being able to say that. I don't remember when that actually wrapped up, but I would imagine that's probably a pretty safe area that would reset the statute of limitations as far as Joffe goes. Um, and I see we have Sean here, and Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry guys, I have not read Trump's lawsuit. I would imagine that it doesn't really include any new information. The only reason I jumped in here was to ask about this January 20 something meeting that occurred in the White House, according to Rick Gates's book, where apparently this whole Russiagate kind of thing originated. Yeah, 2016 January sounds right. I looked up the White House visitor logs and parsed out January, that date, and sent that along in a spreadsheet to you guys. I have had no time to go through and look, but I was wondering if you guys had followed up on that, and if not, I'll take a second look when I have a chance.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that back up. I don't think I've gotten a chance to take a look at that, but yeah, that's a great question, and it's definitely one that I was interested in, and I think we were gonna try to back channel with some of our contacts to kind of get close to people around Rick Gates to see if we could find out a little bit more about that. I don't know, we obviously we just don't have the background on that. But yeah, that's definitely something worthwhile and worth following up on. So I'll track down that and I'll see if I can kind of look through those names and see if I know any of them for sure.
Yeah, that was the only reason why I jumped in, and you guys can feel free to DM me for that spreadsheet.
Yeah,
And,
for sure.
but thanks, Ryan, for hosting this, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you coming in. Hey, Vicky, go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, great. Hey, I'm curious. Everybody was talking about Christopher Steele earlier tonight, and the British connection and whether that, is relevant anymore. I wondered if anybody has any more information about Stefan Halper and the Office of Net Assessment. I'm very, very curious if there's any more information on that, because that seems to me like there was some outside of the country activity with Stefan Halper being in England and getting tips from, especially relevant considering all the recent revelations about the 50 Intel officials who, put a kibosh on the Hunter Biden laptop. I thought maybe there might be some more interesting information coming out about that.
Yeah, so obviously that's been a big point of speculation for a few years. I don't know if we can connect it to the 50 intelligence officials, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we really haven't learned a whole lot about Stefan Halper, and that's particularly outrageous because it's been several years now that Senator Grassley and others have been making inquiries about this, and they've just been stonewalled. And I'm amazed that the Senate can make legitimate inquiries of the executive branch, and then the executive branch can just ignore them, and nothing happens. I'm amazed that can happen. Yes, there's a lot of questions about his Office of Net Assessment contracts. I mean, if you really look at them, they're like book reports, and they're I think a couple of them in the proposals, he said he would go talk to people. I think out of 4 contracts, he only actually did one interview, and it was like with his buddy, pretty much. So these are pretty much like book reports for school, pretty much, and for the amount of money that he was paid, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And either it's something really massive, or it's just something just crazy government spending, and I don't like either answer. Uh, Either way, I don't like it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, hopefully we got to learn more about them. It's a big piece yet still to be learned. I think we will find out that he is connected to somebody else in the story, but we just don't have that piece yet.
Well, to me, it looks like they've got a lot of money funneled through the Office of Net Assessment that's being used for, off the book stuff that intel operations that they can do overseas. And I'd like to find out if anybody has more information on that, because I have a personal interest in that.
So
Yeah, I mean, Walk of Fire, if you want to jump in, go ahead.
I was just gonna say real quick. I don't know if um, Mark Hemingway's piece a couple weeks ago in Real Clear Investigations is what uh, sparked your question, or caused it to come to the forefront again. We hadn't heard much about Halper in a while. It's a really, really good piece. It really walks through his background and history. I don't recall there being a ton of new stuff that I won't say it's relevant, but I will say it's relevant. I read it. I found it very interesting. A lot of the stuff we already knew, but it was good to see it all put together in print. Margot Cleveland had a follow up, I believe, a few days ago, talking about it as well. That was a good piece. And then, it just reminded me to go back and read Stephen Tragy's blog post about, or not blog post, I think he was interviewed by Matt Taibbi, where he really laid out some interesting information about his interactions with Halper, with inviting Carter Page to that conference over there in London in June or June of 2016. I think Schrage had meant to have some follow-up public pieces, and then we never saw them. I'm hopeful that is because he also said that he had been trying to get in contact with Durham, and so maybe something happened there, and so he the kibosh was put on him putting more stuff out in public while Durham was investigating. But some really, really interesting nuggets and tidbits from him. I believe that came out in 2019 or 2020. I can't remember exactly when, but it was a very, very interesting interview that he had, and information that he released at the time. So I would say I think odds are very good that Durham has been exploring that aspect of things, and that we might be able to learn some more on that very soon.
Oh, thank you for that. I'm interested in it because I have a personal long-term relationship with the director of the ONA, and so I'm very interested to hear what happens with that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
but Donna, my friend Donna, who I've known for years, but she's been going down and looking at the Adam Levinger element recently, who was possibly the first whistleblower out of ONA. She's been making me look back at what the Office of Net Assessment was, which is basically it's like a 20-year view on the strategic like readiness of the US. But then maybe linking to how the ONA is then like, I think Levenger was the whistleblower who was like, why are these contracts going to people like Halper or and other people? And I don't know which other people they went to, but it seems to be a quite lackadaisical way of like throwing out contracts or for them to make money. But as far as Halper goes, I believe so he was it in the 1970s, but I forget the, the dad the the step not step the father-in-law he married into got him a job. So he worked there. He got his PhD. He worked his way up within the Department of Defense, something, and then became an academic in Cambridge in 2001. Got his second PhD. Got told off by the FBI for being very naughty with like trying to scam some other informant as a CHS or something. Got given his last warning, and that's when we had the whole like Stefan Halper, Svetlana Likova issue.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, hopefully we do find out a little bit more about Halper. But yeah, I'm sorry we don't have any more information about him right now. Some interesting leads, and I think we're all trying to find out more, but we just don't have it. So.
Hey, I'm going to jump in real quick. I've got to pop off for the night, everyone, but glad I was able to join. Ryan, awesome spaces as always. Hope to be able to pop in a lot more here in the future. I know I've missed the last few, but sounds like you've been doing a great job. So, thanks so much, everybody.
I appreciate that, Walkfire. It's always such a pleasure to have you here, and being able to have you answer our questions is always just great. I mean, it's a rare opportunity for us to get our questions answered, and we appreciate you coming in, giving us your time.
Absolutely, and hey, you're doing great work on your side. Talk about devoting time. I mean, man, you're just blowing and going. It's great. It's great to see all the interest and everyone contributing in all the different ways they are. So, thanks to you. Thanks to everyone else. Y'all have a good night.
Appreciate it. You have a good night, sir. Alrighty. Well, hate to lose Walkfire. I'll give it another minute here. If anybody has any questions or comments, happy to take anything. Don't necessarily have to go late. It seems like I've been doing these chats shorter and shorter. We used to go 7 or 8 hours. Now I'm at like 2 hours, and I'm like wrapping it up. Daniel, what's up, man?
Just UNMB. What's your assessment of Konstantin Kalimnik? You think he's actually, not a Russian agent, or you think it's true? That's like the last thing they're hanging on these articles. It's like that's the only claim that they have left.
Yeah, there's nothing there. I mean, I don't even care if he is a Russian agent. It just doesn't matter. I mean, allegiances over there are so fluid. I mean, so what? I mean, you're looking at, so he's Ukrainian born, first of all. So he's not born in Russia. Is he a Russian agent? I don't know. I think somebody that you can really take a lot of your lead on is somebody like a Rick Gates. So Rick Gates threw everybody in the Trump world under the bus. He took a deal, he gave up everything he knew, and he's saying like there's nothing there, like nothing between Manafort and Klimnik had anything to do with Trump and Russia or any type of conspiracy, and we'll never be able to pound that into the liberals' heads, but if there was something there, it would have come out. I mean, it just would have, because Rick Gates needed everything he could to get himself out of jail. And Manafort, I mean, if he was looking for a deal, he would have traded that in a heartbeat. I mean, he got heavy time, right? And anything that he could have given up to get himself out of that, I think he would have. And when you actually dig into this, like Aaron Monte had a great piece on this, and like you're talking about a couple of headline polling numbers they were like a couple months old at that point, and polls, as we know, have been worthless. Polls are absolutely worth. They showed Trump down like 15 points in this last election, and we all know like it was very, very close. It was less than a percentage, really. So I mean, what value is polling data? It's not, and if you debunk everything else and you say, well, okay, there wasn't collusion there, and there wasn't any type of effort, in coordination with Russians, then who cares? I mean, this is just some guy, and they share a couple of headline numbers. Like, I don't know, I'm starting to ramble, but I just don't see anything there, and it's not a done deal that he's a Russian guy. I don't know. He might have some allegiances there, might have some contacts, but when everything else has been lit on fire, for them to hang on that, I just don't. I don't care.
Yeah,
Thanks.
compared to what Hillary did, compared to what Fusion did through, I don't think Danchenko was a Russian agent, but he could have been. That's the point. Is no one knew. They're taking all this stuff from Danchenko. He might have been a Russian agent. I'm 99% sure he wasn't, but he might have been. So it's a joke. It's a hay squirrel.
Hey Don, what's up, man?
Hey, this is Donna. Can you hear me?
Oh, Donna. Yeah, how's it going?
I'm good. Willie just mentioned me a little while ago. Um, Something that I've been looking at, and it's just been tugging at my head for a long time, is with Adam Levinger and his story. And when you started pulling all of this funding with Georgia Tech and DARPA and and you're trying to figure out who funded them, I keep going back to what um, Adam found with the Office of Net Assessment and who was going after him. It was the Washington Headquarters Services. That was who was funding and doing everything to go after him with the whistleblower stuff. And we started doing a deep dive into the Washington Headquarters Services, and they are in charge of contracts and FOIA requests and investigations and all of this stuff within the DoD. And I'm just wondering if you've looked into doing any kind of FOIA to try to get anything from them to see if they're the ones that were actually funded and signed the contracts for the Georgia Tech people. Has that come up for you at all?
Yes. I'm sorry. Could you say that entity again within the DoD that you're mentioning?
Washington Headquarters Services.
Okay. So I haven't dealt with them directly. I do have FOIAs in at the Department of Defense, pursuing a whole bunch of different stuff. So I don't know about that portion particularly, but yes, I have plenty of FOIAs in at the Department of Defense. I know a few others do too. But as far as funding goes, I mean, I think we actually have that pretty well nailed down as far as what was under contract. So certain, like the enhanced attribution contracts, and there's a few different names and a few different programs that were ongoing, so I can't really pinpoint it for you. But funding was it was flowing from DARPA to Georgia Tech. Now, Georgia Tech needs data in order to perform the projects that they're under contract for, and they purchased data from Newstar. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. but they purchased this data from Newstar in order to facilitate these projects. Now, the program, the main program that we're aware of, didn't really formalize until November 2016, but they were under a proof of concept model, so they had some preliminary access. Now, I don't want to get ahead of a piece that's coming out, but they were doing some work before funding arrived, is my understanding and my reading of certain things that I'm looking at. And that kind of begs the question of where did some of this data come from and where did some of that funding come from? Because one of the things that we even pick up from the Jaffe deposition is that the Alpha lawyers ask him, or they state explicitly, their understanding was Jaffe obtained this data from the Amsterdam Internet Exchange, which, if you look it up, actually has ties to Newstar. And then that kind of opens the question of, well, if Jaffe had that access through Newstar, how or why is April Lorenzen the originator, right? That doesn't really make sense. So that's an open question that we have to get more answers on. But yeah, like who, under what contract was the funding provided that actually purchased the original data for the Alpha Bank analysis? That remains to be seen. There's just too many programs and too many companies and people involved to actually say. And it might be a hodgepodge of a few different entities. And that's not to imply that any members of government knew or had awareness of this scheme, if you want to call it that. But there are some indications that there were actually some malicious actors in government that knew some of what these guys were doing. So,
Well,
I won't get them.
I
Yeah, I'm
guess
sorry. Go ahead.
one of the things that pings me about the Washington headquarters services is how they specifically went after Levenger when he blew the whistle. And he blew the whistle on not just a Halper, but also Barbara Clevenger Deal. I'm sorry. Sorry, I got her name wrong. Sorry, I got to look it up. She was a Hillary person. Jackie Newmeyer Deal. Those were the two people that he blew the whistle on. And right before he blew the whistle, about the time he did, they brought in Barbara Westgate. She came in, she was asked to come back out of retirement by Obama in April of 2016. She took over Washington headquarters services. And then that's when all of that stuff started coming in with Halper, and that's when Adam started digging into this stuff, and that's when they started going after him. He found emails and that just described everything that they did to go after him. He's been trying, and the last that I could find was Judicial Watch was working with him to get those emails FOIA, and they refused the FOIA. And that was in 2018. And there's an interview with Levenger from January of 2019. He did it with Louis Gohmert one day when Louis was substituting for Sean. And Adam said that Durham was looking at his case. And that was about the time that from your timelines, that was about the time the Georgia Tech people started getting emails from Durham. So I'm just wondering if all of this stuff is just interconnected with all of these government contracts going at the same time. They were looking at all this stuff. I just wanted to put that out there as stuff that I've been threads I've been pulling at.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. And to be honest, it's been quite some time since I looked at the Levenger stuff, but I will pull it up and I'll see. Maybe I'll try a FOIA. You never know. Sometimes even if you put in the same FOIA, maybe they'll grant it this time, and maybe I can take a look at that. No promises, but yeah, that would be interesting to know more about. Sorry, go ahead.
There's Judicial Watch did an article. I can send it to you. The articles, because Judicial Watch, they tried to get him, and they shut him down and said he couldn't have them. I'll send you the stuff that I found going through it, but they really went after him hard, and they they really screwed him over. But I just found it interesting that Durham got involved in his case, and it's about it seemed to be about these contracts. He was looking at that. So that makes me wonder if that's when he started pulling on this Georgia Tech thread. It's about the same time. So
Yeah, I have to be a little bit careful. I don't want to
oh,
get
I
too
know.
far
Oh,
out
I
on my
know.
skis.
Oh,
Unfortunately,
I know. I know. I'm just like I said,
yeah,
when you started pulling on that thread, it reminded me of those interviews that I saw with Adam. I was like, huh, that's interesting timing. And so I just started pulling on the thread again. So
yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting because there are some indications, and there is this big discrepancy at DARPA right now, right? Because Manos and others are saying they did attributional work on the DNC hack for DARPA, and DARPA saying no, we didn't test them at all with that. And
right. But
there's
if you
obviously
look at
so many questions.
but if you look at who Washington headquarters services, who they work with and who the departments that they oversee, DARPA is one of them.
Right.
So it's like, what is the deal? And Adam said that he'd been working for DOD since 2006, and he had never even heard of Washington headquarters services until they got involved in his case. So that's kind of how embedded this group is within the DOD. So
Yeah, I mean, I'd hate to think that the corruption is so massive that it ties together the Halper contracts and the Georgia Tech contracts, but I can't rule it out
I mean,
because
yeah,
you
we
just don't
can't.
know where it leads if this reporting was going to DARPA and leading up, or however the tasking was coming down. So we'll see. I mean, it's definitely something to keep in mind going forward, and as we look at documents, it's certainly worthwhile to make sure we're considering all these references to all the acronyms and all these different
Yeah.
things that are going on. So
And he was specifically looking, and his lawyer. I mean, I pulled the interviews with his lawyers. They were specifically looking for specific names, and you can just see if it pops up, if the names pop up in anything that you've seen, and it would see if
okay,
there's any kind of connections. I don't know. I'm seeing I'm just wondering about the timing. I guess that's what I'm saying. It seems that the timing was interesting on when he said that Durham got involved in his case. So,
yeah,
and
I
thinking
appreciate
about
bringing it
DOD
up.
being there. So,
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a look. I appreciate bringing it up. It's always, Russiagate is so massive that you can't remember everything. So it's always good to have people with different perspectives and ideas, and sometimes they really come together. So that's good. I appreciate it.
okay, no problem. Thanks, though.
Thank you.
All right.
Alrighty. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Wide open.
Just real quick,
Sure.
I know that James Baker, who runs the Office of Net Assessment, is a retired naval intelligence officer. So it's definitely a part of the Department of Defense somehow. He's only the second director there, so it's definitely got a a military connection.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there are some massive problems in the Department of Defense, but I want to be really cautious about like throwing out names and stuff. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, we obviously want to keep everybody in mind as we move forward and as we start getting through documents, and there are some problems there, and we are going to learn more, and more will come out in public reporting certainly. But yeah, we'll have to keep everybody in mind.
There's also multiple James Bakers, so just everyone keep that in mind.
Yeah, keep that in mind. There's a million of them, right? Alrighty. Well, I'm gonna do my countdown. This is like my trust fall type scenario where I say, we're gonna start winding down, and then I kind of leave it open, and then if somebody asks questions, like we'll go as long as we need to. So if anybody has a question, go ahead and request to speak. Otherwise, I might wrap this up. There we go. See, I prompt somebody, and then we just keep going. What's going on, Rick? How you doing tonight? Rick, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Ryan?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Another great spaces tonight. You do great work. I'll echo the sentiments of many that went before. Hey, just real quick, and I don't want to beat the Konstantin Kalimnik horse to death, but I think it was a good point that was raised. It is the very last thing that they're holding on to. Even Adam Schiff deployed that when he was cornered by Morgan, if you'll recall. And, she just kind of let it go. Like, okay. Yeah, you're right. Schiff, he's a Russian spy and, and an agent, and Manafort. Yeah, okay. Like, I really feel like we need a definitive, like, 1 or 2 sentence counterpunch. Like, how great would it have been if Morgan had come right back at him after that and said, oh, you mean Konstantin Kalin? You mean the guy that was such an important, riveting, central key player in Russiagate that we never heard his name once during the 3+ years that you guys were, pounding away at this huge conspiracy that was the biggest story on the planet? You mean that guy, the one that the Mueller team didn't even ask to interview, made no attempt to talk to? That one? Like something like that, just to humiliate these people and smack them down, because it's the last thing, but we don't have it. Like, our side isn't deploying it. I agree with you 100%. He's irrelevant. He's meaningless. He's nothing. But yet we're letting them use him as like the savior of Russiagate, which is insane to me. I just feel like we may be kind of missing something there. I don't know. I'd like to just throw that out to the group.
Yeah, I mean, even like Manafort's mention in the dossier is pretty limited, and then to do an offshoot of him to Klimnik, I mean, they're really stretching. I mean, Manafort is not a good guy. I mean, he was not charged with anything related to Russiagate that was alleged in the dossier. There's no collusion type charges. I think he was convicted of mortgage fraud, I want to say. But yeah, I get your point. I mean, it would be nice to have a counterpunch, but maybe he is a Russian agent. I just don't have any information one way or the other. And I think a point to be made is, we learned about Chuck Dolan a few months ago, and Chuck Dolan has a lot of Russian contacts, and it's just not weaponized in the same way that the Democrats weaponize that narrative. Because, okay, Manafort has some Russian contacts. That doesn't mean there's collusion. That doesn't mean there's anything that warrants or merits an investigation. There, I still haven't seen anything that actually merits an investigation. So what if he shared polling data, headline polling data from a couple months ago or whatever? Like, that doesn't merit a massive criminal investigation, And then we have like Chuck Dolan, and he's actually talking to Russians, and he's actually communicating, and he's got a lot of Russian contacts over there. And it's just crickets. Like, nobody cares about that. So I don't know. Maybe it's not a good parallel, but I just get frustrated with weaponization of narratives like that.
Yeah, that's one that just kind of gets under my skin, and like the I can't remember who it was, but just a few callers ago, just he's right. They're clinging on to that, and I feel
really
like
are.
we need to embarrass them. Like, we need to have something that shames people for even bringing it up. Because it seems like that should be pretty easy to do. I may need to go back and reread, but I think it was Aaron Mate. I think he did like a long interview with him, right? And said,
Aaron
hey,
Mate has a great piece. Yeah,
he said, like, did anybody try to contact you? Anybody try to interview you, interrogate you? He's like, nah, nobody. So if anything, it sounded like Mueller, FBI, whoever was intentionally not going near the guy so that they could try to use him as like a virtual patsy, right? But there's got to be an easy way to just smack that one down, and I just don't think we're doing it. But yeah.
Plus all the
point
contacts.
What's that?
said add all the State Department contacts Konstantin Kilimnik had in his early days.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think that's the problem is you can't shame the shameless. So
that's true.
Honestly, they don't care. So you got to do what the Democrats would do, and you go, okay, well, let's talk about all the Danchenko connections, or all, you just have to move on. You have to go, I'm not going to convince these people logically because that's not what they're here for. So in my opinion, you just have to go, look, I could explain this to you, but it's not going to work because you're not having an honest intellectual conversation. So let's talk about, let's move on and go, okay, well, what about these problems? That to me is the only, you're just never going to win.
Yeah, I had a point I was going to add on to that, but I completely blanked on what it was, so I won't be saying anything else. All right.
Yes, when you brought up the multiple Jim Bakers or James Bakers earlier, it made me think about in the FBI documents how they had spelled, people's names crazily, but on paper it looked the same. Like James Comey, they had, like done an R and an N together to make it look like an M.
I'm not sure I recall that. That would be interesting, though.
And I just thought about that, when we were searching the FBI documents in particular, I'll try to find an example of that and send it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd happy to take a look at that. That'd be interesting.
Okay.
Donna, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know if you guys caught Lee Smith's interview with Devin Nunes this week for his first podcast, but Nunes gave out a shout out to the Sleuths Corner. Said thank you to everybody for all your help. Just, I don't know if y'all heard that, but you guys have done a great job. And Nunes even recognized all of the work that you've done because you helped their investigation. Just wanted to make sure everybody heard that.
Yeah, thank you. And we definitely appreciate that. And, I haven't been contributing much, and I really haven't been contributing all that long either. So, I look at guys like Undercover Huber, who was out there in like 2017, and Walk of Fire and Fool Nelson, all these guys, and they've been in the trenches for a long time. And what I really hope for people to take away, they're not like political actors. Like these are brilliant guys, but like they're not really motivated by politics. They really saw something that was wrong, and they're out there and they're trying to do the right thing. And you can say whatever you want about their motivations, but the truth is the truth. And you can't modify the truth to fit a political lens that you want to see it through. It's just what it is. It's just the facts. And I bring this up pretty frequently. I mean, if you just try to sit back and start at the beginning and then see how the narrative has changed, it's really hard to do because it's been such a slow process. But we have come so far from January 2017 when the dossier came out, and the blow up in the media and years of this reporting of like bombshell breaking news. Trump's not going to make out his first term, and Trump colluded, Trump lied, all this stuff. And it's like none of that was true. And then they told us on the other side, oh no, like the FISA process, no, that's totally vetted. You can't abuse that. That's crazy talk. The Nunez menu, oh no, Nunez doesn't know what he's talking about. And all this stuff has just been debunked step by step. And it's been an incredibly long process, but step by step, it's only been going in one direction. It hasn't moved towards collusion. It's moved towards crimes and conspiracies done by the Clintons. And there's no refuting that. You can't deny that. And if you just look at it from the time and what's evolved, I mean, that's the conclusion that you come to. There is, there's nothing there with the Russiagate that's fallen apart, but there is something there as far as Clinton and their involvement in creating, this scheme and orchestrating these crimes. And anyway, starting to ramble there.
No, I think that's a great point. If you look back at 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and look at the FISA defenders that were like, no, you don't understand how intricate all these, there's no way you could fool the FISA court because everything's double checked and triple checked. And, people like us and Horowitz as well, and, plenty of critical around, but proved that that's bullshit. That all these, hey, rely on the authority, rely on what we tell you, is not trustworthy. You can't just take it at face value. And when they say, hey, you just rely on this, your government is doing things right, you should not. You should be a skeptic. You should be a cynic because it's been proven that you should be.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't say it any better than that, right? So hopefully when the story of Russiagate is written, I mean, hopefully that is what is underscored and nothing else. I don't care, the thing about Trump saying, "Oh, Russia, if you're listening, find her emails," which is not the predicate of Russiagate, by the way, or any of those comments like that. Like, they were so superfluous to what was actually happening. They don't even deserve to be in the narrative because it's just a distraction. And you try to fight back against these people that come up with the narratives, and it's just hard because they have the massive reach, and they're the ones that are supposed to have the credibility. I mean, if you go on Wikipedia and you're basically supposed to cite like New York Times and Washington Post, and you're not supposed to cite like the Federalist and the Daily Caller. And I'm not saying those guys are always right or whatever, but they're more right than CNN was. They're more right than the New York Times was. And I don't know what that says about how we fact check things or what that means for how we discuss topics in everyday life. And I don't know what that bodes for the future, but it is scary that the facts don't stand on their own anymore. I mean, we have the classified documents that the media doesn't even cover. I mean, there's some really troubling questions that deserve to be asked, and they're not being asked because the media decided that it doesn't fit the narrative they want to present. They decided that they're going to define what is important for their viewers to know about, and they decided um, that they're going to tailor their reporting and everything that they're saying with through a prism, through a lens that they want to portray. And I'm terrified by what that means because that's not what the free press was really designed to do. That's not what it was intended to do. So got me back on my soapbox tonight, but I mean, that's probably all I wanted to say about that. Draft Guru, I'm going to add you. What's going on, man? Draft Guru, go ahead, man. Oh, I think I lost you. I think I kicked you. Sorry. Willie, go ahead. Willie, are you there?
Yeah, no. When you join the request thing, it sort of cuts out for a minute or two. No, you're saying what really what worries you. What worries me is that there's like 1,000 people who are interested in Spygate. There's there's this crossover with people who are involved with elections, and we just seem to be this like very small minority of of like active people. Like so Donna, who was on before, I know her from like Georgia election stuff. and like previous Spygate, but we it's such a small group who actually really care about what's going on. That's what worries me more than anything is that the same people who are doing the legwork on like Spygate are doing the same legwork on elections, and it just seems a very small group at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree with that. Let's see here. Does anybody else have a question or a comment they wanted to bring up? All right, I'm going to do my trust fall again, right? So I'll give it another minute or two if anybody has any questions or comments. Otherwise, I might wrap this one up. Made it to 3 hours. That's not bad, right? So you guys, if this is like your first time with the chat, usually on Thursday nights at 9 o'clock, we have like a regularly scheduled chat, and we like to come in and just talk about topics and answer some questions, and have a whole different sort of sleuths that come in, and sometimes we'll get Shipwreck or Leslie or some of the others like King or Fool Nelson in here. Whole host of speakers that'll come in. So it's not always just me. You don't have to listen to me all the time. But some really just brilliant analysis, and I'm really happy that we have this regular chat just to be able to hear from these guys. But also, whenever whenever there's like a major event, whether there's an indictment or a key document drop or a news story, you can probably plan on us doing a Spaces chat that night too. It'll probably be a little bit more focused. This is more like a generalized chat where we take a lot more questions, but if there's an indictment, obviously it's going to be hammer time. We're going to be just hammering that topic and getting as much analysis as we can. So hope you guys will come back. Hope you like the chat. Like I said, I'll keep this open for a little bit longer. Otherwise, hey Daniel, go ahead, man.
I got one last question. Was just thinking, which do you think there are any investigators, FBI investigators, that are potentially vulnerable for like reading too much into these like allegations and stuff and going like above and beyond, like really over investigating what should not be investigated by like blowing through these red lights, um I don't know, just any of these guys conducting these interviews that should have known stuff about XYZ. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, great question. Steven Soma's like the primary guy. Like he's my
That's
he's
what I
my
was.
focus because he's responsible for most of the errors and omissions that are determined by the IG report to be material. So he's responsible for most of them. He knew in August 2016 he got the notification that Carter Page was an agent for the CIA, and he dropped the ball on getting that in the first FISA warrant. And there's been a whole host of other events that he was associated with, and it just makes you scratch your head, like how did he not know? And then I think it was Joe Pienka. Maybe I shouldn't say that so conclusively. I think it was Joe Pienka that probably should have known based on the September 23rd, 2016 meeting and the October 3rd, 2016 meeting, where Steele basically brought two completely different stories to the FBI. And on September 23rd, he said that Sergei Milian was like a conduit between Trump and Russia, and he was like using the Alpha server. And then 10 days later, on October 3rd, he said, well, actually, Sergei Milian is like the primary subsource. Like he's the guy that I'm getting all this information from. And I believe it was Joe Pienka was like the supervisor where reports out of both of those meetings actually went to, and he should have been the one that should have said, "Well, wait a minute, like that doesn't really make sense. Like he can't really be the the conduit between Trump and Putin and also be a source for you. Or he should have been like, well, show me something, like give me more information. And he could have killed this whole thing right then and there, and he didn't. So certainly some issues there. I feel like there's probably more. Kevin Kleinsmith, I think, got off really easy. I think he should feel really fortunate to be where he is. But yeah, there's probably more. And then obviously, as we get into the Mueller investigation, I mean, those guys, they wiped so many phones. I think they wiped like 60 phones. And one of the most hypocritical things about this entire episode is the continued calls to prosecute Trump for obstruction of justice and to prosecute him based on the volume 2 of the Mueller report, which was like the obstruction side of it. And to use volume 2 of the Mueller report to do that is just laughable when you consider the Mueller team wiped 60 phones so that they wouldn't be investigated, right? Like, that's just insanity. You're going to charge Trump with obstruction and not the Mueller team that wiped 60 phones so that they wouldn't be investigated. Like, it's just insane. But yeah, I don't know if you have any other questions on that, but Daniel, you there? ABC, go ahead, man. ABC, are you there?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for hosting this again tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thank you.
I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, we've been, researching so many different things, and there's so many different sides of this entire story. And I think with, Durham, I think we have to make sure that we're not we don't expect like a lot of indictments. Like, I think we need to tame our how we think it's all going to come to a conclusion. I think a lot of us probably aren't going to be happy with how it actually ends. I'm just worried about people being really, really disappointed in the findings, and people not being indicted, and the names that we've all researched. Like, what if they just you know nothing happens with them, they just continue doing what they're doing? I just wonder, what are we going to do, like, when all this when all this ends?
Well, I think it's a good word of caution. I think that's important for everybody to manage their expectations, but I would expect more indictments, and I would expect actually a pretty substantial number of indictments. And I think a conspiracy is pretty well defined at this point. And I think, Durham has signaled pretty strongly that people like Joffe and others need to be really concerned. But also, I would point to John Ratcliffe. And I've never found Ratcliffe to be an embellisher. Like, I think he's been a pretty straight shooter. He's not hyping a whole lot of stuff. And, he was in a position to actually review these documents. And he released a bunch of documents to Durham. And he indicated, I mean, based on documents he's seen, he would expect a substantial number of additional indictments. And I'm willing to place my trust in him. So, if he's saying that he expects more, I would take that to the bank, and I would expect more too. And I don't know if that's like the cyber people that have been named, or if that's more people at like the FBI. I can't tell you that, but I would expect some more indictments here, and I don't know what people are expecting, so I can't say everybody will be happy.
I think there will be more. There definitely will be more indictments, but I think like some of the big names that we've talked about, like if they don't get indicted, or if they're part of the story, like all the people we've researched, they're all part of the story, some way or another. But that's not to say that these people will be indicted. Like, we've been talking about Manos a lot. Like, honestly, I don't know what to think about Manos. I was reading through, the last, I think, part 1 of the batch that Margot released. He was talking about, he's on kid duty. He's got a young kid. I don't know. When you read someone's personal emails, you start to, like, I don't know if you see another side of them. You see like their personal side. I don't know. It's with Manos. I think I don't see any indictment with him. I just see like maybe some kind of hearing, maybe from Georgia Tech. I if it all pans out, I don't know. He might lose his job. But then again, there won't be any shortage of people who would, or organizations that would want him, because I think one of the other emails was saying he's someone who's pretty well sought out for positions. So, I mean, we'll have to see what happens. But again, like all the names that we've talked about, like they're all going to be part of the story. Whatever Durham releases, whether it's like a full report, I expect all these names to be there and to be talked about. But, and I think there will be more indictments, but there's some people who we might think will be indicted that won't be indicted. And I think we have to just, people need to prepare themselves for possibly being disappointed. That's really what I'm trying to say.
I'm not saying anything about Manos. I don't know whether he'll be indicted or not. I don't know if he did anything wrong or not. He has to answer why he is affiliated with both the Alpha side of things, and he's going to have some questions to answer about why he's involved with some attribution analysis. And maybe the attribution analysis was just a proof of concept type thing. But being like, there's something weird there, and he's got to answer some questions, and he could well not be charged with anything. I'm not saying he will be. I'm not saying he did anything wrong, but he is close enough to this where he's got to answer some questions. And I'm not going to make predictions over any individual person that's going to be indicted, but we've already had massive indictments, so I don't know what people's expectations are when they're they want the big names. Well, we've already had big names. Sussman is huge. That's a huge indictment. Danchenko is a huge indictment. I mean, those are massive characters in this story. So, everybody that we're looking at now is a massive name. Like there's no small bit characters that anybody should be downplaying or being like, oh, it's only this guy, or oh, it's only low level people that are going to be indicted. Like no. There's no low level people here. These are all huge characters in the story, and I don't think anybody should be disappointed. Like Durham's going to do the best job that he can do, but we all have to keep in mind that these people had years to destroy evidence and to hide evidence, and Durham didn't get involved until years after like the most egregious errors were made. So he's got to do a lot of this based on contextual clues, and he's got to get testimony, and he needs some people to connect some dots for him. But I think he's going to do that. Like I think he will bring some indictments, and I don't think anybody should be disappointed. Like, is he going to get Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama? I don't know. I'm not going to say that he's not going to get Hillary Clinton. I don't know, but he's going to do the best that he can, and people will just have to accept it, and there will be some accountability. So,
yeah, I like what you said there. I think Durham has done a pretty damn good job, and think of all the damn evidence and the documents that his team of, someone said maybe under 10 people. Like that's a small amount of people for how big this story is and how many documents exist. And like there are so many names in this whole saga. There are so many different companies and organizations and money being transferred. There's tons of money in this too, and sometimes we don't know who is a snake oil salesman or someone who's actually someone who we can trust. Like there are a lot of characters who I think are trying to make themselves seem like good guys, but maybe are misleading in some of the things they say or some of their actions, or their actions don't match with what the facts are. So I just think, Durham is doing a very, very good job, and he does have a damn tough job. And I think also you have to go back and look at Durham. Look, Durham is great. I think one thing that concerned me was the CIA torture report, and some people were saying, like, how could the CIA not be held accountable for destroying the documents? And Durham kind of said, there's nothing there. Well, if they destroy the documents, that's clearly not good, but no one will be charged for it or anything like that. So I think that's a little concern of mine, but Durham has a tough job, and this is not an easy task that he has.
Something I worry about is we've got all these people on the radar screen, and that's great. And if people did wrongdoing and if they committed crimes, they should be prosecuted and they should pay the consequences. But to me, the biggest thing is, how did the system allow this to happen and allow it to go on this long? And it would have flown under the radar screen if certain things didn't happen. If Hillary Clinton won the election, none of this, we wouldn't be sitting here. None of us would be listening to this right now. We'd be in a completely different place. It was just a happenstance, and Trump's good effort and good luck that he won this thing, that it got to this point. But we can arrest him. We can throw all these people in jail, and great. But that doesn't change the fact that the system is set up that this could happen, and it will happen again with different people. It might be a different FBI director or whatever, but to me, the ultimate most important thing is to stop this from happening again. And that is not to say that people shouldn't be punished, because that is part of it. Is they have to have a fear that, oh, if I get caught doing this, I'll go to jail. Then I may not try to do it. Great. But the system has to be arranged in such a way that this can't happen. That's my biggest takeaway.
Absolutely. I mean, that's so important. I just, it's incredible, right? That such a small group of people can get away with this stuff. And, everybody is going to run cover for them, and there's no checks and balances. There's no detective controls. There's no preventative controls. Anything they want to do, they're just going to run roughshod over everybody. And I hope there's just a massive amount of action in 2023 to get new laws on the books, and they need oversight capability. And when people like Senator Grassley send letters about programs and stuff, like they need responses, and we need some laws that hold government officials accountable as people, not as an entity where nobody gets held accountable. Like, if you're in a position of power in government and you abuse and violate somebody's civil rights, you should go to jail. Like, it shouldn't be, oh, well, the government messed up. Like, no. Like, you signed off on this FISA warrant. You should go to jail. And I don't know. I pretty disillusioned with our government right now. But hopefully we get some reforms out of it. All right, guys. I've been working long days, and I wake up pretty early in the morning. So I think I'm going to go ahead and call it a night here. We might have a chat between now and next Thursday night. It depends on what news will break. So stay tuned for that. And if nothing else, next Thursday at 9:00, we'll probably have a chat. So hope everybody comes back. And thank you for coming tonight. I hope you all have a good night. And I will see you later. So take it easy, folks. Ending it here.